Welcome to Shardcast, the Brandon Sanderson podcast. We're a bunch of mega fans giving you the news, discussion, and of course, a whole lot of opinions about Brandon's works and the Cosmere. I'm Eric, and joining me is not Ian, it's David.
Moving up.
Yep.
I am David. I am Windrunner on the forums, and my light just turned off again.
I don't know why it's just turning off automatically.
Reasons unknown. We'll just click her back on again and keep moving.
Also joining us is Evgeni.
Hi, I'm Argent on the forums and also in other places. And today, I celebrate this episode with an old-fashioned that I made myself because I am competent at making alcohol.
To be honest, I only think alcohol can improve the quality of this episode. I'm going to be totally just straight up with everyone here.
That's how you drink your medals, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We also got Rosemary.
Hi, I'm Kaymyth. I would like you to meet Pony Cthulhu. He is ridiculous
amazing.
And destined for the Jordan Con charity auction.
Excellent. Oh, that's fantastic. And lastly, but certainly not least, is Matt.
Comatose on the forums and Matt in most of my life.
Yeah. And this one's going to be different than the Half Shard episode, right, Matt?
I'm really hoping to redeem myself and show that I can have a conversation on a confusing, controversial topic without being super pedantic.
If you guys
this is my redemption arc.
Don't know, we did a Fabrial episode and then a Half Shard episode, which is just an hour of us going around in a circle. I think it's a great episode personally, but a lot of people are like, this is one of the worst episodes. I hate it so much. And this might be a similar episode. We'll see. I am Chaos, and we are heading back on in to Cosmere stuff because we're finally through, all the Skyward stuff that's happened, which was a lot. And so Brandon has done a lot of Words of Brandon since we last did a Words of Brandon episode. There's a spoiler stream, there's a con, this is a lot of stuff. And we're not talking about Words of Brandon plural in this episode. We're really, this entire episode is because of one Word of Brandon about Atium. And that has sparked a lot of conversation. And so it's like, okay, let's just make it its own episode. So we'll have more Words of Brandon next time.
Is it about Atium, though, or is it about an Atium alloy?
Well, it should be.
We're getting into it. Nice.
Interesting question.
Yeah. So
the answer is yes.
So full Cosmere spoilers, because though Atium stuff is Mistborn Era 1, we need the power of other Cosmere stuff that we've learned since then, because Atium's kind of weird in retrospect, Full Cosmere spoilers. Before we get on into talking about the Word of Brandon that we'll talk about for an hour plus, let's start with just talking about what we have known of Atium before now. Let's start with that.
So I wanna establish a baseline for
okay.
How, like, the simplest level of how Brandon has presented Atium to be.
Yeah.
Okay. And there are asterisks on top of that. There are caveats. There are WoBs. There are contradictions. There are issues that come from other books. But let's start with a baseline, and then we can demolish that and live in a barren wasteland of Atium confusion.
Yes.
So there are metals in the Mistborn world, and those metals are not inherently magical, but when
way back
when suns
solid foundation
metal is created.
What is a metal? How?
Oh no!
Look at a periodic table.
No.
And so when magical people eat those metals, they gain magical powers, but the metals themselves are not inherently magic. And then there are god metals, which are of the shards, whether that's investiture that has been turned solid or there's something else going on, is not a foundation stuff, so we're going to ignore that. And one of those is Atium. And Atium is Ruin's metal, and when you eat it, you see the future.
And and the metal specifically is giving that power in that one. It's not drawing off preservation.
Yeah, when you burn it, you see the future.
Mm-hmm.
If we're going base level, like starting from what the first books, right?
Yeah. No, when I say when you eat it, I mean when you burn it.
But that's a distinction we're going to get into.
I do not think a relevant distinction. But...
Furious commenters are already like, you have to burn the metals, and Evgeni's like, I know. I know.
And we should say that you can feruchemically, you are storing your age in it, and
or are you storing youth into it?
Youth specifically.
Let's not get into it. I know some people are unhappy with the way it's phrased. It's pretty clear that when you hold Atium and you're making a metal mine, you get older, and then later you can tap it and get younger. And that's how it works. If you want to call it age, if you want to call it youth, that is more pedantic than even I want to be.
Honestly, we could probably talk about that for half an hour, but we're not going to do that.
Pedant.
I would like to read what the Allomantic table, the OG Allomantic table, says about Atium's Allomantic ability. It's the table that's up here. That is okay. It would be right here, but there's a sunspot from my lights.
That's because metals in the cognitive realm.
Don't. Oh man,
that's it.
This episode's going great. I wonder how confused people who are new to the Cosmere will find this episode, because I'm gonna go with probably very. But
we're gonna explain so many things so well. Everyone's gonna walk out of this episode with a perfect understanding of how things were written and why they're wrong.
Great. So the original Allomantic table that's in this poster says pure Atium grants the Allomancer an expansive vision of the future and enhances the mind's ability to accept, process, and hold information. In alloy form, it produces various expanded mental and temporal effects. And Lerasium apparently, according to this, does the physical and enhancement effects.
Because that's what turning people into mistings does. That makes no sense. I've always been like, well, that was clearly wrong. But
now, notably, in the leather bounds, there is a simplified version of this table that doesn't have like just so many words. And so Atium just says there reveals other people's futures. That's it. That's what it says.
So you would call that the most recent, most up-to-date version of this table, would you not?
Yeah, I would say that.
Okay.
I would
is
say
it written from inside the world?
I think it is.
So
yeah,
I think so.
Therefore, it is based on those people's understanding of it and not necessarily how it actually works.
Mhm.
It would be
That is true.
Probably Chris's understanding of it.
Maybe, yeah.
Or maybe like somebody in the Steel Ministry or something like that.
Sure.
That matches in the first edition hardcover of Well of Ascension, because Atium isn't described in Final Empire. It says sees into other people's futures.
Yeah. Yep. That's kind of the typical, really short version in the Ars Arcanums. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then there's some hemalurgic effects as well. And so in the original printing of Hero of Ages, Atium was said to steal temporal abilities, but in actuality, you can steal any power with Atium. So in the hemalurgy table, it says this, and we're not going to get too in-depth on hemalurgy or feruchemy. This is mostly going to be an allomancy-centric podcast here. And it says, Atium steals any power, must be refined. And I think...
So,
there's our first clue.
Yeah, it is.
it's actually the second clue, I think.
Uh-huh.
Because, well, I was going to point to how the first printing of the allomantic table refers to pure Atium and pure Lerasium.
It does. Yeah, yes, that's true. It does say those things,
which is interesting, but I think in that table, the context is, okay, in the first half of this passage, we're going to talk about just Atium or just Lerasium, and then in the second half, we're going to talk about alloys. I almost said alloys because
Yep.
Horizon Zero
Yep,
Dawn
yep.
has been on my mind.
Uh-huh.
I thought you were going to talk about the secret history thing, Argent, which I do think predates this.
Oh,
and
we
was
should
the
probably-
first time.
Well, the
first time
Allomantic
I was
table.
like,
The Allomantic table is like 2009.
oh no, I meant predates the Hemalurgic table.
Oh yes.
And-
Yes. We should talk about that. Yes.
Which was the first time I started having alarm bells go off, just a little bit, but
yeah. So in Secret History 1-1, this is Fuzz talking. Did you? Yes, the metal flared during the moment of transition. You got a glimpse of the spiritual realm then. His connection and his past. You were using Ati's essence, unfortunately. One shouldn't trust it, even in a diluted form.
But he's talking about Malatium.
Yes.
Yeah.
which was always my read of it.
Yes.
But
Especially
some
the
people have
diluted
long
form.
interpreted this as being Atium is
I see.
diluted in and of itself, which I did not like. I don't agree with it, but I thought I in case my bias is not clear, I don't like this what we're about to talk about, but I'm trying to give the other side as good a chance as they can have.
And when I read Secret History, I read this as any god metal is a diluted form of the shard's essence. Like turning the power into a metal means it's not like pure power.
I'm not sure that I agree with that take, because I did think he was talking about the Atium alloy, how it was alloyed with gold.
Yeah, because it is obviously not pure Atium.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I also see that, Matt. That's another read that I've also thought about, because it's not like it's, when preservation like lets Kelsier see the spiritual realm. In my mind, that could be an even less diluted, connection with preservation or ruins influence potentially to see the future much more clearly.
Anytime when you're getting that pure shardic thing, it's like, whoa, that spiritual realm's a lot like Dalinar gets, right? With Odium, briefly. Yeah, so those are some of the basics of Atium. There is some weirdness with Atium. Namely, you can push and pull on it.
And it's Ruin's body.
That is also weird. I will give you that.
It is weird. Yes. Ruin just needs to metabolize it, and then he'll... Yeah.
This is an aside, but whenever Brandon said that, I always imagined like the Kolos get it, and Ruin is just stuffing beads of Atium into his mouth, like trying to get it down.
Yeah,
so he can get his full power.
I've never been clear on what he intended to do with the Atium.
Once he got it, he wins. Yeah. Yes.
The game
I think somebody has asked that, actually. Like, is he going to go and just gobble it all up?
Yeah, and Brandon I think that's where he said the metabolizing thing.
Yeah.
Can I make a point on the pushing and pulling thing?
Sure, yes. Uh-huh.
Okay. I will not go on a long tangent. I have a whole forthcoming metal theory that I don't expect anybody else to agree with, but it's just like what David thinks about this.
Okay.
I do not think that it is weird that god metals can be pushed and pulled on. I think there should be a little bit of resistance, kind of like if you're pushing on a spike or a metal mine. But in my opinion, shard blades are the outlier because they're a god metal that are also kind of charged with that Spren's essence simultaneously.
And they're kind of living.
Yeah, they're kind of living. If Atium was full up of some sort of power that made it unpushable, which seems to be one of the reasons things can be unpushable, I don't think you could make spikes out of it. I don't think you could store anything in it feruchemically because it would already be full. And so all the cool stuff that we can do, like Rasium, we'll pull in something like that. If Rasium was full, I don't think you'd be able to run investiture through it like you do. And so I think it makes more sense for god metals to be able to be at least pushed and pulled upon slightly, because if they were too full, they wouldn't be able to be interacted with in as many cool ways.
I think that sounds reasonable to me.
Yeah. Well, and like a lot of the interference with allomancy at least has to do with like humanity, and so it's like Feruchemy, it's harder when the Feruchemist has put their attributes in, right? When it's a charged metal mind. And the spikes are harder to push and pull because they're in the human body. So I like the idea that with the shard blades, it's the spren that is making it hard to push, like the kind of human cognitive aspect of the spren rather than the divine or shardic nature of the metal.
Just the sheer amount of investiture that exists within a spren.
Yeah, I'm trying to find when I asked Brandon about Atium, because he said there were some things that didn't quite make sense. Like he's like saying, yeah, maybe Atium's like an investiture black hole, and it's just weird.
See, I explain that in my WoB theory too. I'm like, this actually makes a little bit of sense. I have it though, if you want me to find it for you.
Yes, please. I'm
scrolling
got
through
a whole
WoB collection that I didn't.
I think I found it, Eric.
Okay, great.
Oh, there you go.
You know, we should have just been in WoB mode this whole time, but whatever, it's fine. Whatever.
Just imagine you are reading these on screen.
No. Now they will. They will. Well, I can still put them on screen because we have the quotey thing now.
Ooh.
To put them on screen.
I don't watch Shardcast. I listen.
How dare you?
Okay, so the WoB is, Eric asks, is Atium invested? And Brandon says, is it Atium invested? Atium is investiture distilled into the physical realm, right? So is electricity electric? Or is it...
what?
Basically. And then Eric asks, well, I think the question Sharders had was, if it's invested, how can people push and pull on it? That was the struggle. Brandon says, Atium breaks a lot of rules, in the same way that you will see other things break rules. Atium plays weirdly. When you get distilled investiture, you're starting like... My kind of rule for myself is it's kind of like when you start going on the quantum level, the rules just start playing weirdly. Because it's like, what realm does Atium exist in is another thing. Because pure investiture like that is like a mini black hole, right? It's like existing in 3 realms at once, kind of, and things like that. There's a lot of weirdness.
I feel like Brandon answered this question right after he had listened to They Might Be Giants' song Particle Man.
So the writerly answer is there's lots of weirdness because when I built Atium, I didn't have the rest of the Cosmere built, right?
There it is.
And so it breaks a lot of rules that I later set up that everything else has to follow. So the writerly answer is we just have to accept that Atium and Lerasium are some of these other distilled investiture things are going to play very weirdly with the magic systems, but that's okay. Nightblood will too. And there's some things that were built even after the Cosmere was coming together.
And that's the episode, folks.
This was a fun thing that Brandon said. It's like, well, what realm is that?
I think that's a reasonable question.
No,
though.
it is.
Yeah.
It's just hilarious.
Well, it's funny. It's very memeable. I think that it's very funny.
And to put that in our timeline, this is from 2017. So this is where Brandon's brain was at about Atium in 2017.
Pre-Hero of Ages Leatherbound.
Pre-Hero of Ages Leatherbound.
Yeah.
4 to 5 years prior to the recording of this episode.
Yes. We're in 2022.
Living in the future here.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, but in fairness to him, I think that what he's trying to communicate by calling Atium a black hole is that Atium, in the same way that quantum things get weird when you get close to investiture. So it's hard to... He's not saying it's a black hole, but he's saying it's in some ways similar to a perpendicularity, I think, in that it can exist on a lot of different levels simultaneously.
I would say the black hole aspect is just that we don't really know what happens when really small things are very heavy, right? It's that interaction with quantum and relativity, right? That like we don't really know what's going on with that, because that I think that's why he's bringing up quantum stuff. It's like we know some things, weird. But yeah, there's weirdness there as well.
I just had this image jump into my head of people figuring out how to make little investiture nuggets that they can throw at a wall and turn into a perpendicularity portal. Just like magic beans, but investiture. Take you anywhere you want to go.
That's
if you want to walk
possible
there once you get into Jagemar.
Yeah. The image I got is like the classic villain, like smoke powder getaway. Like, haha,
I'm out of here. Yep.
Perpendicularity.
Yep.
Which Dalinar can kind of do, maybe.
Yeah. Then there was more recently in 2020, Brandon made Reddit comments about changes he'd make in his Mistborn screenplay, because he's been trying to write a Mistborn screenplay to get like used to writing screenplays and getting practice with that. So here's what he said. So I'm not sure I can explain it all in this, but one change I wish I'd made from the start of Mistborn is making Atium usable by all Allomancers. As I've gotten further in the Cosmere, using a god metal as just for Mistborn has felt off. So the lore change for the films will mean that any Allomancer can use Atium. This in turn lets House Venture have access to the Lord Ruler's Atium as a control the city last resort. They keep a task force of Allomancers for this purpose, which Ham can join in anticipation of being able to steal it once Sean accesses it. They don't know that House Venture is only given about 100 beads of Atium, not access to the full mythical cache, which will be reserved for the third movie. Makes the world building and storytelling more elegant, I've found, in the film, and it fits better with more modern Cosmere fundamentals as I've developed over the last decade. I think I'd make this change even if we moved to a television show and long form. Yeah.
And he's changed his mind about that now that he's done the ATM retcon. Because that just sounds it sounds weird to me, but because that's one of the ways that it's one of the reasons Vin was so worried about fighting Mistborn was that they could have ATM.
I just want to talk about how reading that made me feel. Reading that made me feel like I was watching the Avatar The Last Airbender live action, and the firebenders couldn't create their own fire. They had to have fire already started. Like, that moment and listening to that WoB felt the same to me.
I can see that.
Quick aside about adaptations. There will be changes. There will be lore changes.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Of course, yeah.
But it is weird. I mean, the thing that's weird with Atium to me, there's a few things that have always been weird with Atium versus Lerasium to me. Like, Lerasium connects you to preservation and makes you a super powerful Mistborn. And Atium, like, it is always just been weird to me why Atium does the thing that it does, right? One, Ruin isn't even good at seeing the future, so, like, that's a little weird. I mean, that could be Ati and not really the power itself, right? Sure, that's fine. Maybe Ruin the power is better at seeing the future and Ati just sucked at it. Sure, fine.
Some thoughts on that, but we'll save that for my full theory.
Do we actually know that he's bad, or do we know that preservation was just better?
That's what I would say. More,
I guess
that
that's
we think
true.
preservation's better, but in a similar kind of vein, I would say that, in my opinion, I kind of like ATM as it is because it is short-term future sight, which I think is something that we could say Ruin is pretty good at. So it's it's not long, like, preservation grand plan. All the Poet Master strings are coming together. It's like right now it's useful, and it's very useful for creating destruction, which I think
until Ellen Duralumin's a bunch of it and just goes kablooey.
We'll get there.
Yeah. I've just always found Atium's ability and Lerasium's ability just I don't see why Ruin's God Metal is this. Like, you could I feel like it would be just as easy to rationalize this as any Shard's Metal. doing this because all shards power let you see the future, right? I don't know why this is Ruin's God Metal. I don't know.
What I always say to this point is you have to compare like to like. So you have to compare Lerasium in Allomancy to Atium and Hemalurgy.
Sure,
right?
I like that.
So I think it makes sense for Atium to have a more limited effect when it is being interpreted through the
Preservation
lens
system.
of Preservation's magic system. So the one thing that bugs me about Brandon's pitch there is it's still not making it equal because every human can apparently ingest Lerasium and get an effect. Whereas with Atium, why is it only Allomancers? And you can say that it's because humans on Scadrial have more preservation in them than Ruin.
Sure.
But then Allomancers have even more preservation in them than regular humans. So why are they able to burn? It just doesn't really make sense to me why making it so all Allomancers can burn Atium helps anything.
I guess I feel like just these pure essences of a shard, like if say you're from Nalthus and not from Scadrial, that should do something to you, right? Like if you're not any of these, like you don't have any access to the metallic arts. Like I feel like this pure essence of a shard, I don't know, why is Preservation just like, hey, this is forging this giant connection and doing a thing? I feel like they should do something.
Well, I think that's a good point, though, is that it is kind of arbitrary. Like, why does Racium conduct investiture?
I mean, that's true.
It doesn't. They just do cool things.
Yeah, I guess
that Brandon has decided kind of fit in, and I actually kind of like the Mistborn movie change because I like in the movie context. I don't like it so much in our books, but because it makes, if you think about it, Atium, Mistborn are already vanishingly rare, and so only a very small portion of people can even use Atium. So some of its value I understand as being just like the power it represents or assassination. But if common Allomancers can use it, then suddenly it becomes a lot more valuable for basically anybody, even if you don't have a Mistborn on hand. But I do think it would cause issues with, I think you'd have to nerf it so that Vin could still beat a regular Allomancer using Atium, but probably not another Mistborn using Atium because they would have an equal tool set and it would be much more difficult. But that's just my opinion, if he was going to really make that change for a movie. But
yeah, I said I was going to save it, but I think I changed my mind.
No,
it
let's do it
like
now.
the right place.
That's fine.
Well, at least this first section of it, of the idea of why is the shard that is allegedly bad at future sight has the god metal that sees the future. Like, what if that was part of Preservation's plan? What if funneling out that Atium wasn't just about weakening Ruin, but actually specifically weakening his ability to see the future and cut off Preservation's plans? So part of it being distilled from that future sight is him literally taking that power away from Ruin and locking it into the metal. So that way Preservation has an edge.
I have never visualized shards' bodies as having like discrete organs that kind of like correlate with abilities.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little out there, but I mean, all of this is out there.
Oh yeah, it's not something I've thought about before, but
this is the most wackadoodle piece of what I've put together.
Yeah, so I think it obviously doesn't work like organs or anything like that, but I think so Brandon has built kind of a soft magic in all of his hard magics, and that's the spiritual realm.
Indeed.
Yes.
You can do a lot in the Cosmere by saying, oh, we replaced one piece from somebody's spiritual DNA, from somebody's spirit web, with another piece, or we excised a piece from somebody's spirit web, or we put a layer of other investiture on top of somebody's spirit web, and that has now a permanent effect on that person or that entity. And so while my gut reaction is to dislike this idea of being able to take away somebody's future sight, we do see people mess with we do see entities mess with other entities' spirit webs to produce very kind of loose effects, right? We've seen multiple instances of memories being taken. If the Night Watcher or cultivation can like make somebody see the world upside down or lose sense, like you could argue that these are physical effects, but maybe she does them by manipulation of the spirit web, and then that propagates down to so you can probably take away somebody's ability to see the future or to read fortune or whatever by messing with the spirit web.
Fortune's an attribute.
And he wouldn't even have had to take it away completely, just muddy it enough, make
interact with it.
Make it to where Ruin's future sight ability was reduced enough that it would be more difficult for him to see Preservation's plan laid out.
I was thinking something similar to this, but what I was thinking was it wasn't intentional. It was like if Ruin's future sight is maybe more concentrated in his physical aspect, which is what Atium is. Maybe if Ruin kind of more exists, the consciousness of Ati more exists in the cognitive spiritual realm, he's less able to access that future sight because that aspect of his shardic power is so present in the physical. And so maybe it was something that was done intentionally, and maybe that's just how the shard's power is.
Whether it was intentional or not, Preservation knew that siphoning off this part of Ruin was vital to his plan working, whether he understood exactly why or not.
Yeah. And then it's become more Preservation's intent is that's why I need to keep the Atium away from him, maybe. I don't know.
I would still say, even if I think this is true, I think the bigger part is putting Ruin power-wise on an equal footing with Preservation, so he can't just destroy the planet. If for some reason it's messing with future sight, I think that is more a bonus or a secondary part of the plan as opposed to Preservation going, Ruin needs to be weaker or none of this is going to matter because he'll just be a blow.
I think both pieces would be very important, and when you have something that you can do that serves two purposes rather than one, it just even better.
Well, because part of Preservation's plan was so that, the Atium could be burned by the people, near the pits, and so to burn off the metal so Ruin couldn't use it. And I think part of Preservation's plan was about, Elend seeing, the future as well with the Atium.
Maybe.
I think we can get more into that when we actually start talking about Brandon's retcon, because the second part of my theory depends on everyone understanding that first.
I had one more thing before we moved on. It is a little of a circle back, but just when we were talking about why any Allomancer can burn, or why only Mistborn can burn Atium, I would say that in my opinion, it's always just made sense that Mistborn are the people that can burn every metal that's burnable in Allomancy. And so it doesn't feel weird to me that, it's not like we have a bunch of people that can burn other, Mistings have one, Mistborn have all. It's just a very straightforward rule. And so I don't think that it needed to be that way, but I don't think it's inconsistent to me either. It's just the way Brandon decided to make it.
I guess maybe Brandon's logic is because the power of Atium isn't coming from Preservation, that can sort of break the rules a bit. Because Atium, you're getting the power from that metal itself rather than from an external source.
The spirit web to be able to interact with it. You know what I mean? You can't burn, for instance, I think he said that if you don't have a connection to some other hypothetical god metal, you wouldn't be able to burn it as an Allomancer and get anything out of it. At least it's my understanding of what he said.
But they all have some Ruin in them anyway, so it's not as much as they have Preservation, but they do still have that connection.
Man, all this stuff is so weird.
Yeah. And that's more arbitrary either way. It's just one or the other.
It's one of those things that I think starts to make more sense after the retcon.
Yeah.
So I think we need to talk about the Atium retcon, because we've been talking around this. David, why don't you read what Peter said a bit before Brandon had talked about this? Why don't you talk about what Peter said?
this is the moment when thunderclouds are building in my mind. I'm going, I don't like this at all. I don't like this one bit.
The darkening of the day sky.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. This is the night of sorrows
for you.
It is. Okay. So we've got coming in from Zeiss 56.
Sure.
That's a mispronunciation. I don't know how you start a word that starts with an X. Yeah. Brandon has, just talking on Reddit. Brandon has said that everybody ought to be able to burn Atium. Like they can all burn Lerasium, which I actually don't think is
That's not what Brandon said. If it's like with the Allomancers burning it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Which has gotten me confused as well occasionally because I forget that sometimes. And the fact that they can't was an oversight on his part that he would have done differently in hindsight. Maybe now he's had an in-universe reason to rewrite the laws of allomancy. It's back to its intended concept. Mistburn can burn all 16 metals. Mistings burn one base metal. Non-allomancers can only burn god metal. So that part is all a little bit incorrect with what Brandon has said. But
right, with what we just said. Yeah, right.
My explanation, Peter Althrum, my explanation for this is that preservation somehow caused all naturally occurring atium to form as an alloy of atium and electrum. An alloy of atium and an alloy. That's not part of it. That was just me really focusing on there. The atium mistings were actually electrum mistings. Zeiss 56. It's a very tidy solution, but it creates the maddening question of what does pure atium do? To which Peter responds to. That answer has already been revealed canonically. Raffo, which is a little confusing when he's saying it's his theory, but it's also been revealed canonically. Then we have, we have our good friend Punny coming in saying, is this proper canon? Parentheses, or as close to as out-of-book statements come, or more Peter the fan theorizing. And Peter responds, I'm not totally sure Brandon is happy with this explanation, which gave me comfort in the moment.
So, and I think a key thing about that is Peter saying the alloy part is his fan theory, but that the effect of pure Atium has been confirmed canonically. I think that's two separate thoughts.
Yes, but how can you have the second without the first?
That's true.
Exactly.
That's true.
Unless the effect of pure Atium is seeing the future like
expansively rather than in the moment.
Yeah, like more like Renarn's visions than say what we see in Mistborn
more
Era
like
1, right?
Elend before he dies.
Right. Yeah, like those are the primary people have seen the future type things. Right?
So like the Electrum alloy would show you the physical motion of other people, because that's the effect we see predominantly.
Yeah, the Atium shadows, yeah.
But then pure Atium would give you kind of spiritual realm understanding of things, or fortune, or something to that effect. Like, because Elend was not seeing, preservation, puppeteering things, right? He was getting an insight into
the plan,
the universe.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's
and exactly why he had to die and how all the pieces fit together.
Yep.
Elend got fridged. He didn't actually.
No. He made his choices.
He was far too developed a character for that to have been a simple fridging.
I know.
Okay, so let's talk about the WoB from the spoiler stream. Let's get into it. So, King's Daughter 613. Primary question. Peter recently said something about Atium in Era 1 actually being an Atium Electrum alloy, which is called Nullatium. Is this accurate? Quick note, Peter didn't say that part. That's a King's Daughter theory about what that alloy could be. It's okay. It's not what Peter said. We just read what Peter said. Brandon, this is accurate, yes. You could, by the way, just continue to call it Atium. That's what they think Atium is in world. It's very slightly tainted. And then there's some Raffos after that, but that's what we're talking about here.
So I wanna say something I think it's non-controversial.
Okay. We'll find out.
I think it is okay for, in general, for characters to use the wrong term for things that they don't fully understand.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so there are asterisks. There is room here for characters to be saying, "Oh, this is Atium, this is Atium, this is Atium," when in fact it is not.
It makes it hard to talk about for us because now we have to go Atium versus
pure
not Atium, but almost.
What if we just say pure Atium when that's what we mean? How about that? That sounds easy enough.
So we'll have a Atium, an F Atium, an H Atium, and a P Atium.
Yeah,
no,
great.
Pure Atium is all caps.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Atium.
Oh, no.
The canonical notation that Eric loves so much.
See, those people now will put capital F with a hyphen Atium, and I like that a lot better than the lowercase f and capital A Atium.
I liked Fatium. That's fun.
No, you got to pronounce it Fatium. That's
there you go.
much better.
That you can do it. Yeah, another pronunciation cast. We can go into that.
Anyway, we don't need to talk about notation of allomantic abilities and things. That's not relevant. So this is. You could definitely call this a retcon, right? Like, this is a retcon.
Do we want to go around in a circle and just give like our initial instinct to having experienced this?
Let's do that. Let's do that.
Yeah, just like kind of our background.
Why don't you start, David?
I'll go into this so even-handed too. If this is something that you like, good for you. Like no judgment. Like for real. Like. If it makes the books work better for you, then like I legitimately am happy for you. I do not like it very much. This is a very long-standing theory that has been around in the fandom for longer than I've been in the fandom, and I didn't like it when I read it then, and I don't like it so much when I read it now because I think it creates just as many problems as it potentially solves, and will require additional explanation on down the line that I think could potentially be confusing to people who are like, wait a minute, what? I thought we knew what Atium did.
Confusing for people who only read the books and not these.
Yeah, like not people who are here going, well, now we know that this is slightly tainted Atium, and we have to, people who are just like, I'm reading Mistborn 9, and suddenly Atium does something weird.
Evgeni, what do you think?
So my initial reaction was, so I generally speaking, I don't have problem with retcons. I have problems with retcons when they don't fit well, like when they break something, right? And so, assuming that Brandon can find a way to make all of this fit, like existing, really Era 2 doesn't matter, but like existing Era 1 and Secret History to an extent, if he can find a way to explain all of that in a way that's, if not elegant, then at least consistent with the things that we see, then I'm okay with this. I'm not opposed to retcons on a principle. It's like, because when everything fits together, it's more recontextualization than it is a retcon, which retcon stands for. So
Retcon means retroactive continuity.
Retroactive continuity.
Yeah. Different.
So, but the thing is, I don't think right now all of the pieces fit as well as I would like them to. So I am like 75% okay with this. But I think some things are going to feel weird.
Rosemary, what do you think?
I am delighted with this because since I have worked through it, I think it all fits together perfectly. Ooh. Particularly with the preservation's needs and what he was doing. But I have shiny explanations. Ooh. I should be able to counter most people's concerns. I think.
David's concerns. Fight to the death, please. Let's go.
I've been sharpening the knives for months.
See, I don't need a knife. I'm a unicorn. I'll just stab you with my horn.
Matt.
So I try to separate myself a bit because I'm a little precious about the Era 1. Like, I'm a little like, these books can
You're
never
very
change.
fond of Era 1.
I'm very fond of Era 1.
You know Era 1 more than any other person that's probably not Dragonsteel, right?
I know Era 1 better than I know how to pronounce Yasna's name.
well, that's a pretty low bar, to be honest.
Yeah, that doesn't say much, does it?
But so I think I have like an initial like emotional like don't change anything about it, Brandon. But when I get over that, I've kind of circled around this a couple ways, but I think I'm still ending up in this similar place to David, where at the end of the day, Atium is weird, and if you're solving the weirdness by making it weird in a different way, what's the point in changing it? And I think I am concerned that it creates more problems than it solves, and that the problems it solves, maybe there's some other ways we could get at that.
Yeah, it's funny, because when I first read this, I'm like, that kind of makes sense. And then the more I thought of it, I'm like, I don't know if this is a good idea. I don't know about that. And so, like, I was initially, David instantly hated it. And so that was a lot of fun. Then we realized this needs to be a full episode and not just a half hour of a WoB episode. Because it's like, we're at 56 minutes, by the way, in our recording.
There are things I do like about it. I like, even though I'm more on that, like, it's not like a blatant, like, 100% no, 100% yes.
Yeah, I'm just worried it's going to be really confusing to people who read the books normally. Jess and I were talking about this like we talk about most things, and Jess hates this. She thinks, look, if it's not in the book, it doesn't matter, really, ultimately. And if you read in, like, maybe this comes up in Era 3 or something, sure. I mean, the book's called The Lost Metal, right, for our last Wax and Wane book. When that comes up, this factoid about it being tainted, like, how are you going to communicate this to readers? Like, it is just kind of weird and clunky. Maybe it can be done. I don't know. But it is a bit odd, and I guess I had gotten in my head that you could not push and pull on metal mines and spikes, but that is totally not true. It's just harder to push on them.
Yep.
And so, like, like, you could easily just say, oh, well, I mean, Atium, like, it has that same resistance, and you can still push and pull on it. Like, that's super easy to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think Shardblades and Shardblade can be the outlier because they're made of spread, and that's a different thing to push and pull on, right? So I feel like
I don't
the
think
main
that's what they're trying to solve here.
I think that's one of the reasons that people say this fits better, is that now we know why Atium. I have Punny's very long list of things that he thinks fit better, and that is one of the things that he says that he thinks makes it fit better. But I think that spikes and metal mines being more difficult to push are already a soft retcon in and of themselves, because there's no mention of that in Era 1. And later, in Era 2, they're like, oh, it's harder to push on a metal mine a little bit. But in Era 1, Marsh is just shooting ferrochemical rings in Asese's body, like, no problem. And so
it's in his body, and
he's a savant, so sure. But, it's not something that was mentioned in Era 1 at any point. So that's already, like, a little bit of a retcon.
Well, and it's explicitly an advantage that Inquisitors have over Feruchemists, is that Feruchemist metal mines that they're wearing can be pushed, and then when the rings go into Sazed,
then he can't.
That switches the thing. And then the whole thing with the Lord Ruler having the bracers that pierce his skin,
which Vin totally pushes on.
Yeah,
in the battle
with the power of the mist.
No. But doesn't Vin try and even before that, like before Vin channels the mist,
tries. He has other bracers and stuff.
Oh yeah, sorry, I'm talking about the other bracers, not just the Atium bracers.
No, so Atium mines, metal mines that are just worn on the body don't gain any additional resistance to pushing and pulling relative to just a metal mine sitting on a table.
Well, right, that's right. That is what I am that's what I'm saying, in that in Era 1 they push and pull on metal mines that are just being worn, and that it is not mentioned that there is resistance. That's what I'm saying.
Yes, and there should have been.
Yeah, and Finn's powerful or something, and maybe, I don't know. Allomancers are weaker in the future. I don't know. Whatever. You can rationalize that somewhat, I think. I don't think that's a big deal, right?
No, it's never bothered me in particular, but I think it is something that is an idea Brandon had later that he's retrofitted.
Right.
And really, now that I'm thinking about it, we don't ever see Kelsier pushing on metal mines or spikes. So we're the only people we're seeing do this are Inquisitors, Vin, Elend, the Lord Ruler, who are all like
not great examples at all, really.
I also think there's an argument to be made that it's easier for a Mistborn than a Misting, because Mistings are just naturally weaker than Mistborns.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Not necessarily.
Yeah, I mean it's a stretch, but
there's ways we can rationalize it, right?
So there's one more thing I want to bring up, kind of to bring us all on the same page about things that not everyone has in their heads all of the time. And that is to kind of define some characteristics of some relevant metals that we've been talking about, because we're going to go into a long list of details, and I think it's helpful to have this information readily available.
Yeah.
So obviously we are talking about Atium a lot, but we've brought up Malatium and the possibility of Atium being an Atium Electrum alloy.
Yes.
So I want to talk about Malatium, gold, and Electrum specifically.
Yeah, let's do that.
So after definitely not having spent 10 minutes discussing things amongst ourselves, we kind of know the effects of gold and Electrum, which are some of the relevant metals here. And that is that gold allows you to see... So it's a little weird, where you're not seeing a future version of yourself or a past version of yourself. You're seeing kind of a parallel version of yourself if you had made different choices in the past. And even though gold is weird, allomantically speaking, what is important, I think, is that one, it is an internal metal, which explains why you're seeing, your own versions of things. And it is also a pulling metal, which I'm not sure how I can explain yet, but let's keep that in mind.
Base metals are all pulling for whatever reason.
Yeah, that's just how it is.
That's just how it is.
Base metals pull, alloys push.
Yep.
Okay.
It's the way.
Sure. Yeah. And then Electrum, which is the other relevant metal that is not alloyed with god metals just yet. We'll get there in a moment.
Yes.
So Electrum is kind of the counterpart of gold, where gold allows you to see a parallel version of yourself. Electrum allows others to see kind of your own Atium shadows, right? One of the books calls it Poor Man's Atium.
Yep.
It's you can see your own Atium shadow.
Matt is correct. Well, you can't.
How is that useful?
It counteracts it. You see, like, if an arrow goes through your chest in the future or something, you're like, oh shit, I'm not going that way. I probably can't be in it now. I said shit.
No, I'll bleep it. I'll bleep it.
So you see your own immediate future, and it allows you to counter Atium, like David said. Like, you can see, I'm about to get punched in the face, so I can. Yeah.
I absolutely love how the more in-depth chart says it, because burning Electrum allows an Allomancer to see a vision of possible paths they could take in the future, usually limited to a few seconds.
Actually, I like that explanation, because it's
correct.
Yeah,
it is more parallel to gold. Gold is you seeing different paths you could have taken in the past, and Electrum is allowing you to see different paths you could take in the future.
Okay.
We're getting somewhere, kind of. Good.
Go, Matt.
We are beginning to understand everyone.
Matt has all the explanations. That's why.
I just I didn't until you gave that.
Yeah. Look, that's why I have these tables. Number 1 elementary table, number 1 feruchemical table. Typos and all. Lerasium spelled wrong on this feruchemical chart, by the way.
Oh yeah.
And so Electrum is also an internal metal, which now makes sense to us, right? Because it's interacting with your own self.
Yep.
And it is a pushing metal because alloys are pushing metals.
And so in the Hero of Ages chart that has most of the metals but has Atium and Malatium there, that's why gold sees your own past, Malatium sees other people's pasts, and Electrum sees your future, Atium sees another person's future. Although you will notice, of course, the obvious issue in that the base metal's doing the wrong thing, right? Gold is seeing your past, but Malatium and Alloy is seeing the other person's past. Whereas the base metal is seeing the future. And so this was how we sort of realized, wait, something's kind of wrong with this. With Atium and Malatium's placement on the chart.
He's saying that Atium, a base metal, shows you the future, but gold, a base metal, shows you a different version of the past. And so they are a little inverse. They don't parallel each other as well as they possibly could have. Not that every metal, tin pewter are weird, the paired things don't always fit, but it's weird that one's base metal shows the future, the other one does something with the past, and one's alloy does something with the future, and the other one does something with the past. That is the slight weirdness.
You would expect Malatium and gold, or you would expect Atium and gold to be similar, and Malatium and Electrum to be similar. If that was how the chart
that was the correct thing on the chart.
Yeah, if that was the correct formulation. But because
But regardless,
so it's very complicated. This has always been complicated.
Yes, and they're not even supposed to be on the chart, right? Because it's supposed to be cadmium and bendeloy, right?
Yeah.
I've always,
because the other quadrants don't have that. The paired metals always have a lot of synergy, but the quadrants don't really.
Yeah, right.
In pewter, steel, iron,
they're not related at all, right?
Yeah. And same with copper, bronze, and zinc and brass. So it was also weird that.
Well, except the enhancement quadrant. Yeah. The enhancement one is the clearest one, but all the other ones don't. Yeah.
And also kind of the most boring, but
they are kind of the most boring. Yeah.
So
yes,
I always thought that Atium, I never equated Atium to gold in this way. I always thought of Atium as being the way Atium interacts with its alloys would make would keep the interaction between Atium, the base metal, and the alloy consistent, but it wouldn't necessarily. So gold by itself shows you paths you could have taken. Atium and gold gives you malatium, right?
Atium, yes, correct.
And that shows paths other people could have taken.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes. It does the same thing as gold, except makes it external.
Correct.
Exactly.
Yes.
That is what it does.
And I think this is important, though, because it does get into where I think kind of the original genesis for this theory is that people say, oh, what should Atium plus Electrum do? And they go, well, Atium should show you Atium plus Electrum should show you other people's futures. But that's what Atium does. So what does an Atium Electrum alloy do? And that's what people have long been concerned about. Some people think it's more important. Some people think it's less important. But that has been an open question.
Right. And so this change definitely fixes that.
Kind of.
Well, yes. So let's talk about things that this Atium change helps with, right? So why is this so similar to Electrum? Why can it be pushed and pulled on, right? Because you could easily argue that okay, well, it's not pure Atium, right? You have a bit of an alloy, and that's making it easier to push and pull on, right? Okay, sure.
The same way you can push and pull on Malatium, for example.
Yes, though I don't think we see anyone push and pull on
that,
that. But yeah,
that is
presumably you can.
believing. Yeah, it is dependent on believing god metals should be unpushable, but sure.
Yes.
And it also fixes something that I've always hated, which was the swapping of Atium mistings for something else.
Do you want to talk about the swapping, Rosemary?
Because this means that you don't have to swap. Because what it says is that if you are burning an Atium alloy with the metal that you can already burn, then you can burn the alloy too. So, because god metal plus alloy equals the mysting can burn it. So all that means is that all of those Atium mistings were really just Electrum mistings. And it means that, because I've always hated the idea that preservation manually swapped things, because it means, I mean, tinkering with people's spiritual DNA in the individual basis is doable, but doing it for an entire species and just having it randomly, it just always seemed like one of those things that didn't make any sense to me, and I hated. We
need to back up and talk about that, because this is actually my fault. This is I think exclusively my fault. why this has happened?
Because you asked for the lob.
Right. So a few years ago, because I had always had it in my brain, there was some weird swapping that preservation did to make the charts work, right? And so that there could be Atium mistings.
The rule of 16, right?
Yeah, right.
Like 16%, 16.
Yeah. 16%, even though,
the original chart doesn't have band alloy and cadmium.
Right.
In Era 2, there is band alloy and cadmium. And so preservation must have done something.
Right. So I was convinced, and David and I were convinced that there was a word of Brandon on this. But no, there's not a word of Brandon about this. There's
not a recorded word of Brandon. It could be lost to the ether of time. But
I legitimately think that it is a theory that it was just there for so long that I thought it was real. Because what did happen was that I asked Brandon about the swapping with the entire premise that preservation did do swapping. But that doesn't... that just supposes the premise is true, where that doesn't need to be true. And so a few years...
But
say that again?
He didn't correct you when you said it. Like, he wasn't like, that's not true, Eric. But which let us continue to believe that, he didn't correct, he didn't contradict you.
Which Brandon never contradicts.
Yeah, he usually doesn't, to be honest.
When people are asking technical WoBs, I think he usually assumes that they are more learned on it.
This happened in 2009, to be clear. This was a long time ago, over a decade ago. And so a few years ago, we were trying to do citations for the Allomancy article, and David and I searched all of them, and it wasn't on Arcanum, and it wasn't on the old Theoryland database. And so I think this was just a thing that was in my head. I don't think it's real. I mean,
even as a theory, though, it didn't work because
it's so
I didn't
weird.
like the idea of it swapping, and this being something to where that Electrum mistings can just burn this Atium alloy.
Yes,
makes sense in the structure of how the 16% is built, and how you got that 1/16 or.
That's probably the best thing about this.
Yeah,
I would say
the things that I have to say about that are that we know that shards can and do interfere with how magic systems manifest. We know honor constricted cohesion to only be able to do certain things. So it's not outside what we know canonically shards do for preservation to do some weird string pulling with the magic system. That's not outside.
True. That is all true, but it's weird how preservation could hard code Atium mistings and Atium's ruins stuff.
Yeah, that's
just
like
feels
an order
weird.
Of magnitude bigger than what Honor did, because Honor restricted the magic itself, and for Preservation to have done that, he would have had to tinker with the spiritual DNA of the entire species.
Which is what he's doing with the mist snapping. He's creating mistings. They're not mistings that exist. He is bringing them to a misting potential and making them into mistings. So that is not that weird to me. Maybe the base metal. Is
that what the mists work? I didn't reread Hero of Ages yet.
No, I have reread Hero of Ages within the last month and read annotations. He is increasing the potential. They would not be able to snap on their own. He's increasing the potential to a threshold to which they would become mystic.
Yeah, but I still feel like that's different, because that's more similar to what Sazed/Harmony did when he changed the snapping threshold.
Well,
to
be fair,
huge change to the magic system.
We do not know what Harmony did to snapping, other than it changed.
That's true.
We actually have no idea what specifically it is, and it has always been an open question to me how much shards can tinker with magic. Like, I agree, you can. I don't know how much they can, right? And with the preservation changing, I thought that was like there was a nice example of it. But then that just turned out to be in my head the whole time. So sorry, fandom, that's my fault.
And the other thing, though, is this whole thing with the mist sickness where the Atium mistings get sicker than everyone else. And I think the explanation for that was because of the interaction of ruin and preservation.
Sure, right.
But...
That's true.
I don't know. Maybe it's a sign from preservation, though.
It could be a sign from preservation, sure.
That they can also burn the Electrum Atium alloy that everyone thinks of as Atium.
Okay, but what if Atium mistings have a gene that makes the Atium vaccine work less effectively on them?
No.
And that's why they get sicker.
Great. Let's bring in Vax into it. We all know Ati likes Vax, right? So sure,
Vax,
easy.
Oh yeah.
It shows up in Secret History.
It does, and Ati himself says it. One of the two things we know about it.
It's like the only thing he says. I remember first reading that and like, oh, we're gonna get some good AT stuff.
And he just says Vax.
Oof.
Are you
vaccinated?
Well, Kelsier punches him, right?
Vaccinate your kids.
But
I mean, he did have it coming.
Yeah, and the other thing I will say is that this isn't a problem, but it is new information that mistings would be able to burn their Atium alloy, and
That's
so
true.
it is not contradictory. But this new explanation is now requiring a bunch of other things to be true. So I would not argue that it's simpler per se.
Or it's something where preservation had to do something extra to the Electrum mistings to make them able to burn.
And
sure, I could buy that, by the way.
Yeah.
I could totally buy that.
And I can easily see the mist snapping being something to where the mists actually imbue people with a little bit more preservation to make them able to snap, because you can get that from the mists. It's pure preservation just floating around.
That is what happens.
So, yeah, I mean, they took these people who had almost enough potential to snap, said, a little bit more, poof.
I do not think that, for me, saying that the mist snapping makes them able to burn an Atium Electrum alloy is that different from the mist snapping just making them able to burn pure Atium. That seems like basically as easy to me as one or the other.
But it could mean that they needed a little bit more in order to be able to burn the alloy, and he knew it was important for them to be able to do so.
But we were talking about earlier how weird it is that you have more preservation to burn Atium in the first place. So that continues to feed into that kind of oddness, if that's the case.
I'm kind of being convinced on this point, because I think if you think about it, like, you have in your spirit DNA, either like people on Scadrial, they have full Mistborn or they have one of the metals. Some people that's going to be a dominant trait where they can snap naturally, and some of them it's not a trait that is ever going to be expressed without the intervention of the mist. And so preservation is just getting the latent people to the level where they could snap, but he's not changing the metal they're burning. He's just they were always going to be electromistings. He's just making it possible so they could snap. Whereas with the Atium, he's changing kind of that fun. This is making a lot of assumptions about how sDNA works, but
yeah. By the way, we don't know dominant, recessive. None of that needs to apply for spiritual DNA. Identical twins will not be the same Allomancers or even Allomancers at all.
And I was more meaning that just as a like metaphor to help.
Right. Yes.
Explain what preservation is doing.
Yes.
He's turning something that was like inactive into something that's active, rather than saying, you're an Allomancer and I pick this metal for you. But maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't like the idea of snapping either natural or mist-aided. I think it makes sense for a person's allomantic potential misting versus mistborn, and if they're misting, what kind of misting they are, be determined kind of at birth or at conception.
Sure.
I don't like that being at the point of snapping.
Mm-hmm. In my opinion, though, like it is kind of like, we know if you raise your potential enough, you just become a mistborn. So in my opinion, these people who are being brought to the threshold of being able to snap weren't anything until they were brought up. And then they became, maybe they had a predisposition, but I don't think they were like, oh, I would be Academy of Misting, but I will never be able to snap because I'm too weak. They're just nothing. And then they're brought into whatever they are supposed to be.
Yeah, I think we're coming at this from different directions. We're looking at it in a fundamentally different way. So,
can we just pause for a second? David, you are too soft. Could we go into Windows and turn up your microphone?
I can bring it closer too. Is that better?
Yes, that would definitely be better.
I probably have leaned back a little bit because now I'm.
Yeah, right. This is definitely people coming at it from a different angle.
Yeah. And I will say, in fairness to this, I think this is the thing that is the best argument for this being the case. I 100% think that this is, if it fixes anything, it makes this make more sense. But it's not how I think about it.
Yeah, because getting the Electromistings to be the Atium Electrum Mistings, right? That doesn't fix the problem if Brandon does want all Allomancers to be able to burn Atium, right? Like that doesn't.
It doesn't do that.
It does not do
that.
It's
a completely separate thing.
And
really separate. I don't like the idea of all Allomancers being able to burn pure Atium.
And it also does not make all humans able to burn Atium either, right?
No.
Because that's not what any of this was actually necessarily changing or fixing, right?
But at the end of the day, it doesn't really play into things because for the most part they didn't have access to pure Atium.
And we want to talk about
find out.
We want to talk about pure Atium. The other thing that obviously this is consistent with is the Hemalurgy table of Atium must be refined.
Now maybe they didn't understand exactly why it had to be refined. They just
what does that mean? Who even made this table? I don't even know.
Yeah, well, no one knows that.
No one knows.
They won't talk about that.
Yeah,
it's extra weird because at least in Words of Brandon, when Brandon talks about refining something, he's usually talking about refining investiture into a liquid form or a solid form. And so while, yes, this is a verb that gets used in all sorts of similar contexts, in the context of magic, that tends to mean something else.
Well, doesn't he also say something about distilling Atium, and David doesn't like the terminology too? Yeah, something like that.
Maybe as simple as heating it up enough to where the electrum in it burns off or something. And they don't realize that's what's happening, but it is.
But it's a solid.
I don't actually know how alloys work, to be honest.
Oh, no.
I mean, I assume electrum has a much different melting point than Atium does. And if they vaporize the electrum out...
You're talking about vaporizing a solid. That's
true. It's going to take a lot of
temperature.
Yeah,
like if
not just to make it liquid. Yeah,
with liquid you can do that.
You can but what if the only way they were able to do this was the Lord Ruler using his brass minds to create extreme heat?
Sure.
I love new what ifs for retcons. What if this happened?
See,
I mean, that's what's so fun about this is all these extra possibilities you get to start to explore.
I love David's salt. I gotta just say, the salty, sarcastic comments always hilarious to me.
My thing with this retcon is if it's applying to some Atium in the books, for Era 1, it has to apply to all Atium in the books.
Yes.
The Lord Ruler's Bracers, what the Feruchemy use, what the Inquisitors use, what the Allomancers use. The only way it works is if we never have actually seen pure Atium.
Yes. And literally, you get it from the pits, and it is in this form, right?
Yeah. It's already tainted.
And it's not been refined.
Yeah.
We know it can be refined from this hemalurgic table, but it's not been refined in the books.
Yeah.
That we know of.
And that's one of the things that I actually read the WoB, and I was like, I actually like this less than I remember liking it, because he doesn't say Atium comes into existence as actually the Atium Electrum alloy. He says it comes in very slightly tainted. And we know that alloy percentages are exact. If you're off and you burn it, you get sick and you get a little bit of power, or you get really sick, you know? But so in my opinion, it should either be an alloy, or it should be it should be the full alloy, or it should not be. It shouldn't be just a little bit tainted and create an entirely different effect.
I mean,
in my opinion,
some alloys have very tiny percentages of the extra metal, so it may be that that's all it takes is just
to create the correct alloy.
This bit of electrum.
I would then my quibble would be with his phrasing, because he should say it came in as an Atium Electrum alloy, not that it came in tainted with Electrum, which is in and of itself
then you need
a little
to take
weird.
Brandon.
Which in and of itself is a little weird, because it is a naturally occurring thing that is coming to existence with something that is already an alloy, which itself is not natural, all coming into this little Atium ball, and it's magic.
And
so
you can you can find natural alloys. Electrum is an alloy that you can find in nature. It's just
you can find. Now we've got an alloy in another alloy. Like, it continues to get more complicated.
I mean, the pits of Hathsin were essentially designed by preservation.
Yeah, and
I
have
created
no
it
issue
to siphon off that bit of ruin.
Like, I can buy that the pits create this specific alloy because for whatever reason, that is how preservation wanted it to be. Like, I don't have an issue with that. I think that is consistent with how things work. Like, that is plausible to me, right?
Atium shows up in the geodes. These are not like naturally occurring geodes. Preservation built this whole system. You could have him build it so pure Atium siphons from the spiritual realm into the physical, and then gets injected with a precise percentage of Electrum.
But like, the pits are already weird, right?
The pits are already weird, but a lot of my complaints come from this requires a lot of and alsos to this. Also, I guess preservation set it up so that it's got the right percentage of the alloy. So
preservation set it up anyway.
More sense.
We can shift into the second piece of my big theory here is to
why not?
Why preservation wanted that alloy instead of pure Atium available.
Okay.
And he has I think there's some very good reasons for it, because if the general populace were to have access to that much future sight, then they could very easily interfere with preservation's very carefully mapped out plan. Furthermore, Ruin still has agents running around, and if Ruin's agents got access to pure Atium and burned it, then they could tell Ruin what's going on, and then Ruin could counteract. So preservation had to make sure that your average person couldn't see that much future sight.
So that is presupposing that pure Atium is more expansive future sight than what we are seeing.
I am taking this from what Peter said, that pure Atium's effect has been canonized, and I'm taking it from that one version of it where it says that Atium grants an expansive vision of the future, because we already know that the Atium they use is not that expansive. So I'm taking those pieces and putting them together. I mean, there is some supposition here, but I think that there is some decent evidence to support it. But that's why this is a theory and not canon.
I will say, I want Atium to have a stronger power, because I always found Atium's actual ability to be so short-term and weird to me that I think a god metal should be more powerful. I understand it's filtered through Preservation's magic system. Yes, I know, Matt. I see you there. But if Brandon's going with this retcon, I want pure Atium to be cool. Okay? That is the thing that I want, right? That is important to me. You know?
Would large amounts of future sight be cool enough for you? Like Ellen?
Yeah.
Although he was limiting it, so.
Or something kind of like Renarin visions in Stormlight, something like that. That's not just like a few seconds in the future. Yeah, I would be a lot more okay with that, personally.
And I think there's a very good argument to be made that Preservation would not want that freely available to everyone.
Yeah.
Because it could really break his plans. So
that I buy. Yeah.
He painted it with the Electrum to give it a more specific, shorter-term future, but still had enough in there to where when Ellen, the right person at the right time, Duralumined it, he was able to see enough to realize what he needed to do.
Yeah.
I am less a fan of that because I think alloys should do what they do when they use Duralumin. And I also think that
okay, right, sure.
If Atium is so dangerous that we don't want Inquisitors to get access to it, they've got Atium spikes in them, so they can just kill one Inquisitor, take that spike out, refine it, and then burn it, and they've got whatever information they needed.
They have to know that's what it does. And if Preservation made very sure that even the Lord Ruler didn't understand that, which he very easily could have, I mean, he had all the pieces there, and he's like, all right, if I obscure this piece of information, all right, potential futures mean that this works out right. He's looking at it from this giant, intricate web of little choices create different possibility branches.
But Ruin would know if it's pure Atium or not.
Ruin would know. Yeah, Ruin knows his body.
He would know.
And the Lord Ruler, and the Lord Ruler knew
Maybe
to
that's why
it.
it's only a tiny amount. It's not enough for Ruin to realize, to catch on to.
That's a stretch, in my opinion.
Okay, however, the shards on Scadrial are metal blind, such that Ruin could not see the Atium because it was in a cave lined with metal.
Yeah, but the Lord Ruler taking the Well of Ascension let him know what the beads of Lerasium there would do. Like, he instantly had knowledge of that. And so Ruin would know what pure Atium did. He would have to know.
Oh, yeah. No, he would know that, but he wouldn't necessarily know that the Atium circulating in Scadrial has been tainted with an Electrum.
But he would just be able to know the difference?
And seeing that they're seeing people fight and not that they're seeing some expansive vision of the future or whatever other thing potentially pure Atium does.
This is getting into, I guess, how aware Ruin is of things that are happening.
I think he would be able to tell the difference between an Atium Electrum alloy and pure Atium. I don't think that is a stretch in any way, right?
Based on effect, I don't think just by looking at it, because I think if he looked at it,
yes,
just see
yes, based on people burning the effect, yes.
Yeah.
I think he would realize that if it's this Atium Electrum alloy and, the Inquisitors, maybe they're just thinking, oh, it's stealing temporal abilities. Maybe he could realize, oh, this would be charged with a different thing if the Atium was refined, right? Like, Ruin would know that, surely, right? He would know how Hemalurgy works implicitly and completely, right? Mm-hmm. And he does.
Agreed.
So I think he could figure it out. And so I think that is a good point, David, that Ruin has had thousands of years to figure that out. And I have no doubt he would be able to tell the difference. And if Ruin wanted, they could take the Atium of, from Inquisitors and refine it if he needed.
It is also possible that at that point, Ruin was so overconfident that he had beaten Preservation that he wasn't even thinking about that Preservation had extra plans.
That is true. He did seem very confident.
Yeah.
the explanation that I like a little more personally, if I was going to be a person that liked this theory, is that Atium, in the form that it's in, is uniquely useful to keep Elen's final army of Allomancers alive long enough to burn it all. If they're all sitting there having trippy versions of the future, they're gonna die. They're not fighting the cause and winning.
That's a good point.
That's what I think is more compelling personally.
Well, yeah, because we would want preservation. Preservation wants it so that army can burn off all the Atium, right?
If any Allomancer can burn Atium, in theory, potentially, maybe not.
Yeah.
Well, actually, that's not true. I won't go down that path because then we're going into the movie version.
Yeah, and I don't think Brandon is changing that because he cannot change it so any Allomancer can use Atium.
No.
Like, he cannot do that.
Can I read what Elend actually says about when he's burning Duralumin?
Sure, let's do it. That sounds great.
This
It's a
is
good passage.
So it says, then Elend burned Duralumin with his Atium. Sight, sound, strength, power, glory, speed. Blue lines sprayed from his chest like rays of light, but those were all overshadowed by one thing, Atium plus Duralumin. In a flash of knowledge, Elend felt a mind-numbing wealth of information. All became white around him as knowledge saturated his mind. I see now, he whispered, as the vision faded, and along with it, his remaining metals.
Right, and so the other attributes are because Vin is powering him, right? In that, right?
And then so he's getting, So I'm not quite clear on what Elend sees there. Like, is he seeing super
preservation's plan?
Yeah, pretty much.
That's the wob, is he's seeing his place in preservation's plan, which is useful, but also Marsh's sword is sticking out of him at that point, so he's not got a lot of options left about what's going to happen.
Well, no, like he could have kept fighting, but at the end he just kind of goes, okay, I see that my purpose in this whole thing is to die so that Vin gets enraged, so that she takes Ruin out with her, and so I just
also because Marsh needs to be there at the right time to pull the earring out of her ear.
Yeah, that's already happened.
That's already happened.
Yeah, that's already happened.
Yeah, that happened
because she's ascended. But the thing is, I guess, is he's not really seeing that far into the future.
Yeah.
At that point, if he's seeing it, like he's having like an expanded. He's seeing something he wouldn't be able to see with Atium on its own, but it's not like he's getting this like super far-reaching future sight that we know that preservation would be threatened by if multiple people could burn it.
It is at most he's seeing a few minutes into the future because it's very soon after this that Vin.
So it is unclear to me whether because the text talks about Vision going white, like he gets overwhelmed with information and stuff like that. It is not clear to me that he actually sees in the same way that Atium does.
Right.
So like it's not like that he sees Atium shadows advancing multiple minutes into the future. It sounds more like he just gains an implicit understanding of preservation's plan, or his place in preservation's plan. Or you know how we often say, because of Brandon, that Hoyd knows where he needs to be, but he doesn't always know why.
Yeah.
And so it feels a little bit like that. He knows that he needs to die for preservation's plan to work out. He doesn't necessarily know all of the details of why that is.
Oh, I would flip that actually. In my read of it, this isn't about a choice that Elend makes because his death is already assured. Marsh is about to kill him. But this is a moment where Elend understands that this is all part of a plan and that he's not dying for nothing, that they've won. And so it's not like a sad moment. It's an I've won moment. I've already won.
Right.
Yeah. Which for me is what I like about it. But that's kind of an aside.
And what I interpreted this at the time is what sometimes is forgotten is Atium has two effects simultaneously. It shows you the future shadows, but it also enhances your mind, so you have an increased ability to interpret what is happening and react to it. And so for me, it was that second effect that the Duralumin was really playing on to give Elend that insight into I'm accessing more information, and I'm also able to interpret my place in it immediately. more accurately or have more insight.
With the passage of what Ellen's doing, Brandon is very clever because it's very deliberately vague, so that really helps a lot of things when Brandon's deliberately vague about these god metal things. One.
Mm-hmm.
But it occurred to me, the same thing that you thought, Matt, about the expanding the mind's capacity to process information. That is very interesting because the thing with the spiritual realm and like these pure shardic powers, like any shard can access the spiritual realm, right? But it can be very overwhelming for a mortal to see it. We see that again and again with Kelsier, etc. But Atium's almost a little different because it's almost allowing you to be able to process that information. And I actually really like that. Assuming, if whatever pure Atium is like leveled up this Atium Electrum alloy that was what we actually saw in Era 1 or something. That is actually cool because I still don't really know why expanding your mind's ability to understand things would be necessarily ruins god metal, but you're totally right, Rosemary. It's completely arbitrary. Who cares? But it's more that it's not just seeing the future part. Like the understanding is really, really important. And that just sort of clicked for me that, if you saw, you're able to actually understand what the spiritual realm is saying, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so in order to make this retcon work, then the other thing you would need to do is make Melatium also enhance the mind, which I think isn't too, because like we see Melatium used like twice and it's not in like an action sequence. So
where
like,
you need to process it immediately, right?
Super fast. Yeah. So that's not a huge barrier, but it is something that like if Atium is a alloy and it does the mental enhancements, then all
of them need to.
Alloys should do something similar.
Yes, agreed.
Mm-hmm. I do have a note on all of this, and it has to do with how investiture in general comes packaged with the ability to understand what that investiture does. And that is doubly so true for shards.
Yes, but I could still potentially argue, like I agree with the spirit of what you just said. And so I am nitpicking, which in a slightly different context of that.
The Shardcast experience.
Yes.
This is about.
Because really, the shard's power, that is investiture. Right? That is investiture. Brandon's defined investiture, that stuff. But like when preservation gives a bit of that power so Kelsier can see the future, right? Like he does not get that implicit knowledge of how to experience the spiritual realm. And like when right? And like that in that purified sense.
That is not how I read that scene. I don't think preservation is granting any power to Kelsier. I think preservation is somehow allowing Kelsier to see things as preservation does. And because Kelsier is not as juiced up as Laris is, he gets overwhelmed by this information.
Sure. And I do agree with the practical thing of, if you have like a magical ability to use investiture and do a thing, I absolutely agree with the premise of your statement that yes, the investiture lets you know what it does, basically.
Well, and that's why with Awakening, the more breath you have, the more instinctive like commands and stuff become.
Right, exactly.
There's still another piece to this, and I'm gonna go kind of a little bit out on that wackadoo tightrope again. But we have the issue of if malatium is the gold atium alloy, what about the fact that there's already some electrum mixed in there? And
it is weird.
We can work around, and I feel like this interfaces with this issue in that, so say the electrum alloy doesn't need nearly as much of the extra metal as the gold alloy does. And at that point, you have so much more gold than electrum in there that little bit of silver doesn't do much more than taint the alloy to make it imperfect. And it messes a little bit with the ability to understand what you're looking at. Not quite enough to make you sick from burning it, but we do know that imperfect alloys don't always make the Allomancer sick. It just makes their power a little weaker.
Yeah, you can be a little off.
Yeah, so that just, it's so little electrum in there to begin with that it just throws the alloy off slightly, enough to where you're not really processing the information as well as you would have had you actually gotten a pure Atium gold alloy.
See, I would rather just that malatium is an alloy that contains gold, silver, and atium, because I don't think there's a rule anywhere that the alloys need to have like only two components.
They certainly don't.
They can't.
It's just the ones that we have seen defined on screen that exclusively have two components. I know the more elaborate.
Is that true?
Pewter, iron, or pewter, steel, and electrum are the only ones that we've gotten specific proportions of things, to my knowledge. And both of those.
Don't we have no duralumin?
Oh, maybe duralumin has two as well.
Duralumin
Duralumin
percentage, which is very different from actual industrial duralumin, which incidentally was invented in our world for building dirigibles.
Ooh, let's get some airships on Scadrial.
Which is why it's always been hilarious to me that the Mistborn world figured it out without needing to build stuff with it.
Sorry, just for a moment, I was so confused. I thought I was going to Wikipedia to look up duralumin.
That won't help.
I actually went to the copper mine, and for like a period of 4 seconds, my mind was like, why is Wikipedia talking about the metallic arts?
Because it's important, Evgeni. It's important. It's probably the most prominent use of duralumin in pop culture ever.
That makes me happy for so many reasons.
I thought there was an alloy that had more than one thing. Like more than just the base.
Pewter, definitely. Pewter is a mix of different metals.
But not Allomancer's pewter. It's just two. Kelsier defines it as specific
that's
percentage.
one we very specifically know.
Yeah, not really pewter, but okay.
It's Allomancer's pewter.
It's Allomancer.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
It is a totally different alloy than real life pewter.
It's called a pewter.
Yeah.
A pewter. Yeah. And he says even like pewter can have all kinds of stuff in it, but Allomancer's pewter is this percentage tin and this percentage lead.
Yeah, they're probably like, they look at what they mix in there and they go, this is what it's most like, but even though that's arguable because none of us know anything about alloys, so I don't know.
My knowledge is from Mistborn, which is not good.
Yeah, in my opinion, like you can do something, you can make some argument about the various percentages and try to math it out so that the amount of silver is minute. There's more silver than gold and electrum, but if we're saying it's a very small amount of electrum in the first place, you can say that. I don't like it. I think that it should just be a solid alloy.
But because like duralumin, for example, is 4% copper, 96% aluminum, right? So like you're all like, and I know we're dealing with like parts of 100. But if you're looking at this little bead, even like trace amounts of electrum, I like the silver, I feel like is going to be enough to be a couple percentage points, which we know from other metals is effective enough to change the alloy.
Yeah. Like I don't have an issue with malatium just having the right percentages of silver and gold, that if Atium is that Atium Electrum alloy, right? That seems easy enough to retcon, honestly. Like that's fine. I'm not super worried about that in particular.
Yeah, I think the only way this can possibly work is if the electrum in the Era 1 Atium is such a minuscule percentage, like sub 0.5 or whatever, that it doesn't affect anything else, which it doesn't feel great. Like, because one of the reasons we read Brandon books is because things are set up and foreshadowed so perfectly in advance that by the time they are revealed, they feel great. So, like, this is going to be one of those things where it's like, yeah, but you didn't really set this up this way, right? It's just that things fit well enough. And not only that, but like, if you're saying Era 1 Atium is 99.5% pure Atium or whatever, and 0.5% Electrum, is that enough to actually make an alloy? Like, because with other alloys, you have a little fudging room. And so with this, if like you are essentially within the margin of error, statistically speaking.
I could see an argument for god metals being more sensitive to alloy percentages than regular metals would be.
There's a lot that you can fudge with god metals about this to make this work.
I am a Jedi master at fan wanking things to work in my mind, in case you hadn't already noticed.
Yes.
But so I can work my way around this. I still think that it fixes some of the issues that I had with things before enough that this works better for me than the original did.
At least the preservation switching or whatever on how to make Atium missing. I do like this better.
I always hated the idea that preservation could have done that.
It's always weird. But again, we don't know the extent as to how shards can interface with the magic systems that, right? We don't know. The metallic arts are just created with
they don't have direct control in what the magic system manifests as. I mean, they could maybe make tweaks once it's there, but they don't invent it.
I am closing that can of worms.
It's such an open question, to be honest, of the limits that shards have there. Put your comments below if you are a metallurgist and you know things about alloy percentages. Please let us know. I could have sworn I read recently that one of the allomantic, like one of the things that was an alloy had like more than two things. But
if you can find it.
Yeah, I've been trying to find it, but I can't. So
yeah, I don't think it exists, but I could easily be wrong.
We don't know the percentage from the books, but in the real world, Bendalloy is made up of a couple different things, isn't it?
Yeah. And Bendalloy also liquefies. The real world Bendalloy liquefies at a very low temperature, where you can drop it in a hot drink and it turns into a liquid, which is why it's always been amusing to me that Wayne just eats them in chunks when you could just drop them into a drink and gulp it down and you wouldn't even notice it's metal.
Allomancer's Bendalloy.
Yeah.
You need a thermos on him to keep it hot.
My Bendalloy thermos. In Era, that's Era 3. Era 3, the sliders will have that. Right? Because Bendalloys are sliders and cadmiums are pulsars.
Yeah, it's cadmium's a pulsar.
I can only remember the Era 1 misting names. I cannot for the life of me remember fairing names at all.
Cadmium always amuses me because it is so poisonous to actually eat. Just like, Marcy, you really shouldn't swallow that until it's time to use it, because otherwise you're going to get sick real fast.
So the only reason I remember that cadmiums are pulsars is because of one of the broadsheets that says this person pulses, in quotes, through meetings or something to that effect because they're boring.
Huh. Right, because they're boring. Nice.
Valid.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. So, I like that this helps in the creation of Atium mistings, because Atium mistings and what preservation did there is a bit weird. My conditions to really liking this, to making this a worthwhile thing that Brandon eventually will probably need to canonize in the books, unless we're just never seeing Atium and Lerasium ever in the future. That seems unlikely, right? Like, I feel like we will eventually.
It would be reasonable for him to introduce this as a subplot in a future book, to present it in such a way that the fandom can understand.
It is going to be clunky, which I think is my number one issue, is the clunkiness aspect. But if pure Atium has more expansive visions of the future, cool. Like that works for me. A bit more like what Ellen did, maybe not as extreme as the Duralumin thing, but
his "it's full of stars" moment.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you want it to be more extreme though, because it's pure? Yeah, because for me, what Ellen does with Duralumin is strange, but Atium is also strange, and it's not like so wildly out of place with burning Duralumin and getting all of that future sight in one moment instead of over a course of period of time. But
I imagine one of the reasons that Harmony has made sure that Atium doesn't sneak out is because it's basically the rule-breaking piece of the RPG. Like, this is the one thing that you don't really want your players to have access to because it just ruins the entire campaign.
Oh, that's why it ruins metal.
Atium is vorpal.
It ruins the world-building logic. There you go.
It's just... no, it's more like it ruins the plot because they just solve it instantly. It's one of those things that is so powerful that it can really screw up a world if someone's using it.
And that's the thing about Atium is it's there in the books. There's also this thing that comes out where the combination of what Atium does, it can be used for some things, but it really makes you into an effective killer. Right. There's a synergy specifically between what this metal does and being good at taking people out. It can make you good at other things too, but that's
huge counterpoint.
Okay.
It also makes you a really good protector.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah, true. Yes. Yeah.
Preserver, you might say.
Yeah.
And there is preservation's hand in the
allomancy
in the change
of the allomantic effect.
Twist my arguments against me.
No.
Eyes rolling. No.
Yeah. I think my main thing that I don't like is that this is just going to be very clunky in the actual books. It is weird in that sense.
So I want to talk about that because I disagree. I think this can be handled fairly easily.
Okay.
And so the way this works in my head is we are in either the Lost Metal or Era 3, or maybe even Era 4, but I think Era 3 is a good place for that because they're on that technological level where they understand things.
Uh-huh.
And they can say, it turns out that the thing that, you can literally just give it a scene in a chapter where somebody's like, our ancestors thought that this thing was Atium, LOL, Rafflemau, they were so dumb. It's actually, turns out if you looked closely enough, it's Atium mixed with Electrum. Or rather, it is Atium mixed with gold and silver, and I literally had the wiki page for Electrum open. It's gold and silver.
Yeah, Electrum is just gold and silver.
And trace amounts of copper, but whatever.
Not Allomancer's
Electrum.
Yeah.
45.
And if you work out the math, it turns out it's an alloy of pure Atium and other things that combined form Electrum. And you can just have that one scene that doesn't invalidate Era 1, but builds on top of it.
Yeah,
But you additionally do have to reestablish what does Atium do elementically.
Yes.
What does Atium do feruchemically?
Yes.
It adds complexity there.
Yes, it does.
Yes,
it does.
Yes. And that's the other thing that I wanted to bring up. We can kind of solve the elementic side of things by retroactively in error 3 or whatever saying, oh no, yes, they said Atium in the books, but it's actually not. But then you have to figure out feruchemy, you have to figure out hemalurgy. And that is where I start running into problems, right?
The hemalurgy one's fine, because you need it refined. Sure.
Fine.
What does that mean?
Sure.
Right? Like, but more just, we have this alloy of Atium, and that feruchemically you store age or youth. But what does pure Atium do? And like, it's just going to be weird in the books unless we see pure Atium do cool things, you know?
Yeah. And to be fair, we haven't seen Lerasium used in fruit. We have no idea what Lerasium...
That's true, yeah, we have no idea. Yeah. We have no idea. Or hemalurgy, other than all abilities. Whatever that means.
So I always felt like feruchemically it fit very well. Like, I liked that it stored age. It felt very powerful. It allowed the Lord Ruler to do what he did. And so, like, you can come up with an idea that maybe pure Atium does something even cooler feruchemically, but I liked how it was.
Sure, right.
And I think I was going in the same direction where I was trying to extrapolate from, well, okay, if in Allomancy, an Atium Electrum alloy gives you, this awesome fighting ability where you see where other people are going to go, and pure Atium gives you the ability to just see the future, maybe further out, maybe it is not restricted to like physical motion or whatever. Then if we translate that into feruchemy, the alloy allows you to manipulate age, and the pure metal, the pure Atium, allows you to I don't know what it would allow you to do, but it would be more than age, right? Or even if you go just a moment,
vitality or something.
And you go all the way into hemalurgy, where the main distinction is Atium as presented to us, which if we assume is Atium/Electrum, gives you temporal metals. Do we ever see an Atium spike do anything else?
No. But no, we don't. It's unclear with the Inquisitors that, Ruin's dealing with.
Yeah, I kind of had assumed that when they were talking about an Atium spike, since hemalurgy was such restrictive knowledge, that they were probably only using whatever refined hemalurgy spikes are, so Atium is still a true wild card, and they just never thought to try it with anything else, and they were like, this is a temporal metal, and the Lord Ruler never decided to tell them that.
Right. But my thinking is, if you combine Atium with, but the same way that there is a jump between Electrum Atium and Atium in Allomancy, maybe there is one in feruchemy, and maybe there is one in hemalurgy, and I think there is a little bit of support in the text for hemalurgy because of the assumption that Electrum Atium, quote unquote, only works with temporal abilities.
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
Or a counterpoint to that is the problem we're solving with Allomancy, with the similarity between Electrum and Atium, doesn't hold up
for
the other magic systems.
Not at all.
Because in Feruchemy, Electrum stores determination, which what does that have to do with age? And for hemalurgy,
more determined when you're young.
So it's like we're trying to solve this problem based on how Atium works with Allomancy, but then we're potentially making it weirder with the other two magic systems.
Look, warmth being in the cognitive quadrant doesn't make any sense. It doesn't even matter in the other one.
That's just a mistake. But so, as a follow-up question, Argent, to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying, your hypothesis is when they thought that Atium only stole temporal powers. It was because they were using Atium that had been tainted with Electrum, and that was all they could get with it. I do not like that because there is a regular base metal spike that already does that. And so it feels weird that an Atium alloy does something. There's this base metal spike that steals temporal powers. That's
which one
the one
is
that
it?
It's one of the new metals.
I've got it up right now. It is cadmium. So it's doing an Atium alloy spike is doing what cadmium does. That seems weird.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, that's fair. That is fair.
Yep.
This was where Brandon would say, there's different logic in Feruchemy and Hemalurgy. I'm like, is there though? Is there though?
There are people in world who would interpret this way.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. And this is where I end up, where I think this is the fundamental divide between people who like it and don't, that I think this breaks more than it solves. And it can be workable. And if it happens, I love Brennan's works. I'm going to get over it. I'm not going to cry myself to sleep about it, but it doesn't work for me.
You sure? Would you like a teddy bear?
I would not. I already have several that
What about the Sunni Pup?
Yeah.
So,
yes, everyone needs a Sunni Pup.
I found a WoB from the Hero of Ages thread where Brandon is
2008, way back.
Yeah, 2008. Obviously, Brandon was in a different headspace about this, where he's commenting on what the god metals do.
Okay, sure, nice.
So just kind of, I think this sums up my resistance to this idea, because I think part of me remembered this WoB and is like held on to it, right? So the question is, allomancy is fueled by preservation's body? How exactly does that work? And how does that interact with Atium? It's fueled by both gods' bodies? And he says, the powers of ruin and preservation are shards of Adenalcium, pieces of the power of creation itself. Allomancy, Hemalurgy, Feruchemy are manifestations of this power in mortal form, the ability to touch the powers of creation and use them. These metallic powers are how people's physical forms interpret the use of the shard, though it's not the only possible way they could be interpreted or used. It's what the genetics and realmatic interactions of Scadrial allow for, and has to do with the spiritual, the cognitive, and the physical realms.
Yep, I remember this.
Condensed essence of these godly powers can act as a superfuel for allomancy, Feruchemy, or really any of the powers. The form of the superfuel is important. In liquid form, it's most potent. In gas form, it's able to fuel allomancy as if working as a metal. In physical form, it's rigid and does one specific thing. In the case of Atium, it allows sight into the future. In the case of concentrated preservation, it gives one a permanent connection to the myths and the powers of creation, i.e., it makes them an allomancer. So when a person is burning metals, they aren't using preservation's body as fuel, so to speak, though they are tapping into the powers of creation just slightly. When Vin burns the mists, she's doing just that, using the essence of preservation, a shard of Adenalcium, to fuel allomancy. Doing this, however, rips through her body. It's like forcing far too much pressure through a very small, fragile hose. That much power eventually vaporizes the corporeal host, which is acting as a block and forcing the power into a single type of conduit, allomancy, and frees it to be more expansive. So a lot of that's about Lerasium, but like the whole Atium is like it's more restricted when it's a solid and does other things when it's a gas.
Right. Exactly.
Like, I feel like the messiness around that could be used to get around some of the issues with Atium.
More it's already so weird and restrictive.
Yeah, I think you're gonna need to send me that one. So I can read through it every day for the next 6 months and maybe understand what it says.
Go reread that Hero of Ages spoiler Q&A, everyone. I'll put a link to Arcanum and the original thread.
It is like the foundational Cosmere Q&A as far as I'm concerned.
Yes,
when I read that was when I had my Elend moment where I was like, "Oh man,
it's like, there's you saw 2 of them, but actually there's 4 others. This is there." I'm like, wait, what? That we've seen already.
The other thing, I saw a question in here just to kind of give people a sense of where this is coming from, where Eric is like, "Oh, Scadrial, is that the name of the planet that Mistborn is set on?"
Yeah, because we don't know. We literally didn't know shards, didn't know Scadrial. Like,
this is the level that Brandon is talking to us from. So obviously he didn't need to have things as developed back then because he could just spout off random stuff and blow our minds.
Yeah, literally, like we had no idea of these things in 2008 until Brandon opened his mouth, and here we are.
Mm-hmm.
Really, pre-Way of Kings was a different time.
This is a different time, very different time in the fandom.
Mm-hmm. So this is ending up potentially circular, but I do have one more WoB where Brandon was talking about what his thoughts were about replacing metals if he was swapping out what mistings were what at one point. And this is Hoboken 2016, famously good audio, so crystal clear.
The Arcanum Unbounded Hoboken signing, I think, took a huge amount of effort to try and actually parse the words that were actually said in this. So, only the best of information right here.
Only the best of information.
We did actual audio manipulation in an attempt to get the audio to be clearer.
Alrighty, so this is coming from Wictacular.
Nice.
Who was trying to get at something that we'd been wondering about for a long time. At the end of the first Mistborn trilogy, it's really significant that 1/16 of the soldiers who got really sick are now Atium mistings. Brandon, yes. Yes, 16, that when Preservation set that all up, he, number one, was not all there, but he was trying to create 16 as a symbol to say, hey, catch this, I've given you a clue, help. Probably, I've given you help. And so it was devised specifically for that, inaudible. Something's going on here, spectacular. So were there 1/16 of them just inaudible, not significant? But we know there were more than 16 metals. Brandon Center said, no. They would have been mistings of other types as well. Yeah. Wictacular, did he bump one of the other types to make it into 16? Okay, do you have in your head inaudible? Brandon, chromium. Wictacular, chromium. Brandon, yes, that's right. It probably would have been one of the metals that was difficult to get at that level of technology. It would have been chromium. Chromium would be hard to gather at that time. Actually, no, it would have been aluminum. What? About a minute later, while signing someone else's book. Hold on, there's a caveat to that last answer. Let me finish signing this and expand on that. Pause. So it would still have been aluminum, but not for the you're thinking. It would have been aluminum, but there's an asterisk next to that answer.
Great.
Hold on. Just for a moment. So there was an inaudible kind of between that initial section and the section below where we start talking about chromium. It's possible that in that break, the subject of, well, what would have the other metals been, or something to that effect, came up.
That seems weird, though, when the whole thrust of the question is, there's 16, but there's more than 16 metals. That seems odd if he was like, what are the ones that people aren't using? Like, we know what those are. We know the ones that they didn't. We know that they weren't burning cadmium.
And later, Brandon's talking about bumping specific metals.
Yeah, so here. Yes, let's see. Wictacular. Okay, interesting. Brandon, hard to get chromium. Wictacular. I've been thinking about... Brandon cuts him off. Oh no, he bumped aluminum. Yeah, he bumped aluminum. Sorry, I changed my mind. Wictacular. Oh. Some of this things are relevant.
Brandon is making it up on the spot.
Yes.
Well, I think that goes to illustrate just how confusing this has been all the time. But there is reason that we believed that things were getting bumped. It was not like something that we pulled out of the ether fit our theories.
Yeah.
So on the Wictacular, on the 16 or the inaudible, Brandon, the 16. So the answer is yes, but it's not what you're thinking it is. Wictacular, okay. Brandon, all right, there's an asterisk on it, okay? There's an asterisk on it. It's not what you're thinking. You're making assumptions. So if that didn't clear everything up for you, I don't know what will.
Great. I'm so glad we did this. This is great.
We needed a laugh at the end.
I believe we are now all more confused than we were when we started this episode.
100%. But I think the fact that this happened in 2016, long after he wrote the original Mistborn trilogy, like, he is going to get those details of Scadrian magics wrong or confused, right? Like, it's not like Atium's coming up a lot in Era 2, I guess, thus far. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's understandable that he doesn't remember these details, right?
And the other thing to remember too is the books are canon, WoBs are not.
Yes.
Until so even if he said in the past things were swapped, he's made it very clear until that's said in text, he reserves the right to change it.
And ultimately, this takes us all the way back to the beginning where, or not the beginning, but like an hour into this episode. Where Brandon's like, you could keep calling it Atium. And until the books contradict that in some way, or explain that, or recontextualize that, or retroactively continuity change that, then it's Atium, and that's fine.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So that's a great way of saying that we've all been arguing about something that's not quite yet canon.
Yes.
Welcome to the show, everyone. I'm sure you had just so much fun listening to this.
I mean, we had a good time arguing about it.
Yeah. But I can see how the pits can be designed to be this alloy. I have no issue with that. I can see how like the mistings work with this alloy. And I think the only explanation that makes sense as to why Preservation wants it to be an alloy is if regular Atium just gives too much future sight, and that messes things up. That's the only thing that makes sense in my brain.
Or if it makes it less
valid reason,
less accessible to ruin in some way. Like if it's, I don't know.
I do like retconning Atium to be Atium Electrum, so that it fits with the established rules of base metal and alloy, external and internal. Like, if those things work better, if the Atium we've seen was actually an alloy of Atium and Electrum, then that's fine.
But it doesn't.
But I don't think it does work.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. Yeah.
But I'm with Argent on this. I think it does work better.
No, the Atium turns the Electrum into an external metal, and
a
Brandon,
pushing, right?
Yeah, and Brandon has said that. I'm pretty sure he said that the god metals don't fit in like
the internal, external pushing.
External.
It doesn't make any sense.
I don't think that's part of it.
Yeah, like that. That's like I only think the thing about gold. Like the golden Atium pushing and pulling was more just, these don't belong in the table in the first place.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's something weird
they don't
is
fit into
happening.
That structure.
Like, I don't think making Atium into this alloy helps, because what we're saying then, like, the logic of alloys being pushing doesn't even make sense with god metals, right? Because then you have 16 plus alloys that like it's not even useful terminology, I think.
And then they're all alloys.
And so the issue that some people have identified, I think, though, is how bronze interprets Atium, because because bronze writes, you can, part of how you identify which metal is being burned is by its push-pull variance. And so with Atium, presumably people, although in Final Empire they treat gold and Atium as
high
weird
metals.
Separate metals, high metals.
Gold's weird. I buy that internal explanation, by the way.
So I don't know, do we know what Atium's bronze signature even is?
I don't remember if it said if it was pushing or pulling. My memory of this issue is that there are two parts. There's kind of it's beating against you, and then, or it's pulling away. It's the pushing and the pulling. And there is some other thing that I don't remember, but there's the pattern itself, which is the quadrant. And that's, there's kind of a pattern for physical, there's a pattern for mental. And they said, and then there's a pattern for the two higher metals, gold and electrum. And that's something that has bothered people historically, because they're like, well, it's a god metal. Shouldn't it have its own pattern that's not in accordance with the temporal ones? And maybe because it's an alloy with a temporal metal, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I think Punny has listed as a thing that makes more sense now. In my opinion, Atium is doing temporal stuff. It can sound like a temporal metal.
Or if gold and atium just both sound different, maybe they just get lumped together because
these are the two things that are not like the other 8.
That are not like the other 8, yeah.
I think it was specifically said they were similar. I can look it up really quickly.
Yeah, I absolutely don't remember this.
I have found the part in the Final Empire about Bronzepulses.
Great, let's do it.
Yep, I've got it. Eventually, you'll be able to sense 2 different pulse lengths. Internal metals like bronze and copper give off longer pulses, which itself is a little weird because copper doesn't give off most pulses. No one can sense copper except for Vin. Give off longer pulses than external metals like iron and steel. Practice will also let you sense the 3 patterns within the pulses, 1 for the physical metals, 1 for the mental metals, and 1 for the 2 greater metals. Pulse length, metal group, and push-pull variance. Once you know these 3 things, you'll be able to tell exactly which metals your opponent is burning. So it is canonically, at least they believe it to be the same pattern. It could be a very similar pattern that they lump together, but he's calling it the same.
Okay.
And that's something that people like.
Similar pulse lengths is the measurement that's doing the category. Isn't it pulse lengths that's doing the category?
No, it gives you internal versus external.
Well, patterns within the pulses, it says.
Right.
Yeah.
Patterns within the pulses. It says.
3 patterns within the pulses. Yeah. Which, I mean, the description here has always been a little weird where I'm like, okay, there's pulse length. Like, I'm like, I can't visualize it at all. But
let's talk about the rhythms in relation to this. That'll really clear things up, won't it?
Hell
no.
no.
I think it makes enough amount of sense for me to like visualize or conceptualize this well enough. So like let's say you have short pulse lengths, like you have high frequency short pulse wave patterns, right? And so without any rhythm to these things, you have something like wom, wom, wom. So like relatively frequent. Whereas if you have a longer pulse length, you might have something like wom, wom. And then to these lengths of the pulse, you apply some Morse code-like pattern. So like you might have one pattern for, let's say, the physical metals that is like wom, wom, wom. So like long, short. Or I think I did short, long. And the combination of, well, each individual pulse is long, plus here is the pattern of these long pulses, tells me that this is an internal physical metal. I can figure something out of that. Whereas if I have short pulses and it could be the same pattern, it could be a different pattern, it doesn't matter, then that tells me something else.
But it repeats more quickly. That makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
So it is interesting that Atium has a
similar
temporal pattern.
Yes.
Now, if you do ascribe to the preservation swapping theory.
Oh no. Great.
Maybe.
Oh no. Sure. Yeah. Why not? Why not?
Maybe the swapping changes the pulses.
Well, not if preservation dumped chromium or aluminum, which is in a totally different quadrant. Like what?
That's true.
But chromium out of the table.
I think it's easy to say if you're looking for a reason that you're like, I like how Atium is. You can say Atium is messing with temporal stuff, and what it's telling you is, okay, what are we influencing? And Atium's influencing time, and these other ones are kind of messing with time as well, so they sound pretty similar. That could be how you explain it. But it's not like, it is something that you can say works better, and that's something that I won't fight you on.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Like I totally forgot about that.
That is a big thing that this fix does solve.
It's still a very allomancy centric point of view, which I think is
which doesn't help the other 2 magic systems.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Especially Feruchemy, Brandon has really given, I feel like, the short end of the stick.
Yeah, we didn't even get ferrochemical abilities for the other 2. Like at least we got some weird cryptic things about Lerasium and Atium and Hemalurgy.
So at the end of the day, I think, meta commentary aside, we're gonna need to just be comfortable with some Mistborn things not making sense, and that's going to be an artifact of early Brandon Cosmere. We can try for 3 hours to justify why Atium might need to be an Atium Electrum alloy, or why things work the way they do. And we can get close, and Brandon can get close, and we can all try our hardest and bestest. But at the end of the day, the final answer is Brandon didn't have all of the Cosmere worked out at the beginning.
He didn't have all the Feruchemical and Hemalurgic powers all listed out. I don't think he did that by the end of 2008. No way.
It's going to be... I think you're right. It's going to be messy no matter what. Personally, that's why I would just leave us with the mess we know instead of giving us a different mess.
I like this new mess. It's so pretty.
But I do agree with you. Like, it's at the end of the day, maybe there'll be a net positive where it is cleaner. And the other thing we have to keep in mind is Brandon knows things about the Cosmere that we don't. So there maybe are some things in future Allomancy or whatever,
or future God metal stuff, right? From different shards, right?
Yeah, that Atium creates real problems for, and so maybe the retcon makes more sense with the extra context that he has.
That's a good point.
In the past, it breaks more things in the past, but it
fixes more things in the future.
It preemptively doesn't break more things in the future.
Yeah.
Which is
I trust
Brandon.
I do trust Brandon, but as it stands with the information as we have it, I'm not happy with this, and I would like to get more in the canon.
Trust Brandon, and I'm trying to figure out how he put all the pieces together before he tells us how he did.
Yeah,
and because it's fun, and I'm weird, but I'm in good company.
Yeah, exactly. Like, we just have so little God metal stuff. Like the Racium stuff is like the first Stormlight God metal stuff, other than the Shard Blades are in Shardplate is technically Tanavastium, kind of, or something like that.
They're so weird that I don't think they should be used to be based on anything about God metals for the most part. It's such a corner case compared to the other whatever we don't do or don't know about Trellium. That's at least it's a material that exists and not a living spren that
Racium isn't a void spren, right? It's not.
And does it make a difference if it's like a splintered shard versus a there's a lot of
sure,
maybe there's a lot of
and how do avatars fit into all of this?
There's no more Atium now. There's no more AT.
Shard blades also are not all. How does that work?
Honor.
Because some of them are a combination of honor and cultivation.
Yep.
And cultivation is a whole shard, and honor is a shattered.
I don't know how much the splintering of these shards.
Oh no! I know, but it's just there's a lot of weird stuff.
There's a lot of weird stuff. That is true. Yes.
The easiest answer might be God metals or pure Shardic investiture behaves the way we want it to behave for the context that we are putting it in, because a wizard did it, or a Shardic
Brandon did it.
Well, and I could even buy an explanation it works different on different planets. There's enough I don't know, there's so much weird stuff.
That's the secret, is that Brandon actually writes soft magic systems masquerading as hard magic systems. And with lots of rationalizations, but at the end of the day, it's going to do what he wants to do.
If you dig deep enough, every magic system is soft. If you dig deep enough, I think.
Why is allomancy of preservation? We have an answer. I'm very fond of it, obviously, for those of you who know. But
it preserves your
right. Brandon didn't go into it. He started with allomancy being cool, and I think he retroactively made it work with ruin and preservation and stuff, right? Yes. He didn't start with, that, right?
Yeah.
He does this is obviously a preservation. Not really.
Yeah, I mean, like, if you think about it, Final Empire or whatever original Mistborn were one thing, and there was Aether that had the Proto-Ruin and Proto-Preservation. Those were not in the same continuity at first.
Yeah.
So
He definitely... Well, and it's like, this one worked more elegantly, but the retcon of the shard pool in Elantris, right?
Mhm.
Like, that... Brandon didn't have shard pools worked out when he wrote that book. So, like, it's a retcon that works really cleanly, though, because we, like...
Yep.
And there's Shadesmar-y things in that pathway there, right? But
Yeah. So, like, it all worked out, but...
So, mind you, it doesn't work perfectly, right? The fact that you can put somebody, like, because they put the... They put Rhino.
Yes, actually Rhino, yes.
And we see him like dissolve as if the pool was like just disintegrating him or whatever, when in fact what should happen is that this person should just transition to the other side. So it's not perfect.
Yeah.
But it works well enough.
Yeah, right. Like there's different weirdnesses with perpendicularities. Like we did, like our examples are not very good.
Oh yeah, the throwing the Inquisitors in the well thing was the other, like...
I had forgotten about this.
Yeah.
I was like, this was random. Okay.
That's a whole other can of worms.
Like, there's room for perpendicularities to be weird, that we don't know all the things. Anyway, I don't think we at all know where we are in any of this, so that probably means it's time for Who's That Cosmere Character, unless there's any other final thoughts.
No.
I'm
out.
Okay.
I think this episode has been just a giant... Here is the direction that Brandon wants to go for reasons that we are not certain he has completely thought through. Because, like, on the surface level, replacing Atium with Atium Electrum is kind of okay, right? It solves some problems, but we think that it brings other problems into the forefront, and whether you think that those problems... Like, whether you think that solving the initial problems is better, like, because you have to compare the two sets of problems, right? And where you land on this divide is going to be an individual thing for everyone. So Brandon is thinking about things, and word of Brandon says it's an alloy, but it also says that you can pretend that it's not.
Yep.
So we don't know what's going on. Brandon doesn't know what's going on.
He could retcon this retcon in a few years until it happens in a book. Like, does it really matter?
Yeah.
Don't make me dream, Eric.
The wob where the original wob where he said that every metal has a allomantic, feruchemical, hemalurgic effect, and then the god metals also have another effect on top of that. Which I think he's...
What?
I'll link it to you. I have it here.
Oh,
You're talking
great.
about the god metal alloys? Like with each of the individual metals?
No. So the question is, does every metal have a feruchemical and hemalurgic property? If not, are there metals which have feruchemical or hemalurgic properties which do not have allomantic ones? And he says every metal has a feruchemical, an allomantic, and a hemalurgic property. Presumably, he's talking about the 16.
Yeah.
The godly metals each also do something else. And then he goes on to talk about.
Oh, right, like additional effects on top of those three effects. Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, and so that, and I think I've seen that come up also in like the discussion of Lerasium. I remember there being some discussion way back that, if an Allomancer burns Lerasium, it's different than when Elan, Joe Schmo, just eats it. I think
that's
Brandon's
Ellen's last name, by the way.
What?
That's Ellen's last name.
Joe Schmo.
Yeah, that's his name.
Brandon's walked back on that thing because I think there's also WoBs now where he says, "Oh no, if a Allomancer burned Lerasium, they would just get stronger."
Yeah, right.
So
a little bit.
Yeah. So it's things like that where it's changing. But there, Atium apparently has an allomantic effect, a hemalurgic effect, a ferrochemical effect, and another effect that we don't know about. But
third finding. No.
Now maybe that's...
it could. It could.
Yeah.
It
could.
allows you to make swords that eat investiture.
Don't get started on god metals and fabrial science, because then we're really
oh yikes, they probably do specific things too.
They do. There's a law about it. If you could get a shard blade separated from the rest, you could do something with it. He won't say what.
Yeah, I bet. I'm not even sure Brandon knows what that would do, to be honest.
No, he has no idea. He doesn't want to figure out what all these Atium alloys do. He doesn't. If he needs one, he'll make one. He doesn't know or care.
He does not. Yeah, no, I absolutely do not think he has all the abilities of every god metal alloy. No,
and
way.
That's what's interesting about how Brandon likes things to line up, and so when he can line them up, he'll do it. But he never goes through like the whole. Like with fabrials now, we know some things like some of the fabrial effects kind of mirror the allomantic effects a little bit,
but just allomancy again.
But just allomancy. We know who Brandon's favorite child on stage is.
Right.
Allomancy.
Yes.
Yeah.
I do want to know which one the middle child is of the three.
Oh.
Yeah.
Is it Feruchemy because it is so weird, or is it Hemalurgy because it's so budget elemency?
I mean, I feel like Hemalurgy is the baby, and Hemalurgy, it's so easy to rationalize Hemalurgy doing whatever Brandon wants. Like, it's so easy.
It all depends on where you put the spikes.
It stole the preservation stuff, and if you do it in the specific way it makes Golos. Like, sure, why not?
Well, like, even the temporal Atium thing, that could just be, it was where they were placing the spike, it only stole temporal powers. Yeah. But if you placed it somewhere else, it could steal something.
Well, yeah, that was what we thought long ago, right?
Yeah.
That's just like, I mean, they just didn't experimentally figure out all these things. They just figured out a few.
Intent matters, and
great. Put intent into it, sure.
Attributes, and that's what it's.
Sure, okay, we gotta go to who's that cosmic character, guys. Jesus.
This character is from Roshar.
Menace. Tien.
Tom.
Braze.
Void in drag on a horse.
It's time for Who's That Cosmere Character? All right, everyone. Welcome to Who's That Cosmere Character. This episode's almost over. Thank God. Where you send 5 clues and a character to wtcc@17char.com. After each clue, these panelists have a chance to guess who's that Cosmere character. We're back to Cosmere things. No more Skyward things for a long time. Okay, this first one is sent in by Mage. And so, clue 1, this character is male.
Doxson.
Dox, no. We're going back to OG sort of who's that Cosmere character clues.
Oh yeah.
Classic.
The unhelpful ones. Well, I guess it cuts off 50%. Well, not 50%. Cuts off slightly. I don't know what the breakdown is.
But
yeah.
Certainly less than 50 if you take Mistborn Arawat into account. Because
that's true.
Yeah.
Oof.
What about Laros?
It's not Laros.
What about Laros?
Get out of here! You're fired.
With emphasis on S.
Yeah.
I'll go along those lines, and I'll say Ati, since we were talking about Ati.
If it was Ben, it'd be Ati, because Ben would
pick some more low-hanging fruit and try Kelsier.
It's not Kelsier. All right, clue 2. This character is Rosharan, so none of your guesses were close.
Again.
I was just thinking about how we were all guessing Scadrial.
Well, all that crap's wrong. Well done.
Teofil. Teofil.
No, it's not Teofil.
I love him.
What about Red? The Rosharan variant.
It's not Red.
Axius the Collector.
It's not Axes.
And Adeline.
It's not Adeline. Adolin. Again,
I'm never going to say it that way.
Please comment below about your feelings about pronunciations. Really helps the algorithm, so thanks a bunch. Clue 3. This character is a shard bearer.
Yakimov.
It's not Yakimov.
About Tushadar, the Thalen shard bearer.
No.
I wrote his article. He's dead.
How many obscure characters can we guess?
Let's go with
Halloran?
Amaram.
It's not Amaram.
Halloran?
It's not Halloran. Yeah. Clue 4. This character is a traitor.
We already guessed Amaram, huh?
Yeah.
Sadius.
Oh, Moash.
It's not Sadius. It is Moash. Yes. Don't think too hard about this character is a shard bearer. So like the tense doesn't matter much. It's like it's plus shard bearer, you know.
I mean, he still has Yezrian's blade at the
I guess
end,
that's true.
right?
I guess that's true. That's a good point.
Yeah, I was thinking we could have, like, Seth could have been. I was gonna guess Seth on that one.
Yeah. Nice.
Is he a shard bearer right now with Nightblood, or is he not? Before he gets his friend blade? There's a question.
What
Great.
was the last clue?
Great. The last clue was this character's not Sadius.
Well, if only I'd had that piece of information.
That would be funny if that was the opening clue. This character is not Sadius.
That actually would be really funny if this character's not.
So it's like, oh, so we have hundreds of characters to choose from.
Thousands.
Try like 3,000.
Yeah.
I think a not WTCC could be fun if all the clues were this character is not, and then you end up
As long as it
yourself.
was specific enough, yeah.
Yeah, you'd have to.
I was on the last clue. I was too busy deciding whether the clue says traitor or trader.
It's a traitor. It's Risen.
Risen. Yeah, I guess he's not a shard bearer.
Wisdom.
All right.
Risen's not a man.
Yes, he is.
Yes, he
Risen?
is. No, sorry.
Oh, yes.
Vistimus.
Yes.
Oh, I said
Yeah, because the clue is that this character is male. Right. We don't remember what the previous clues are. See, you're writing them down, Rosemary, and that's cheating.
I mean, there's nothing stopping you all from doing the same thing.
Yep.
Except that we don't want to cheat.
And we say, Eric, tell us it again. And
I'm sorry. This is a reasonable accommodation for my ADHD.
It is completely reasonable.
I agree.
Next one is from Cheyenne of the World Hoppers podcast, aka Veronica, who's been on a few episodes now. Wasn't on by the time this one was sent. But clue 1, this character is not human.
So it can't be human Nicola.
I don't know, maybe.
Cheery.
It is Cheery.
What the hell?
Well, at least it's over.
Apparently
Sorry,
today
Cheyenne.
I'm channeling Ian.
I call
Someone has to take the start of Ian.
conspiracy.
Oh, this one's so good, though.
What are the other clues?
The other clues were this character is a POV character. This character is on Roshar. This character only has a few words of dialogue. And clue 5, this character is one of the last surviving members of their species. Whoa.
Damn, I can't even
That would've been
nitpick
good.
on those.
That's a good one. I think
Those are
people
good.
just love Cherry so much. That's
Yes,
like,
I mean,
it's a good
yeah.
Who
concept.
doesn't love the adorable
Yeah.
little mini dragon? I mean,
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that reminds me. I bought some things.
We're circling back to
from-
show and tell now because this will never end.
I bought some stickers of
Ooh, they're
Cherry.
shiny.
They are extremely shiny.
Okay, so now we're back to priority queue. Who's that Cosmere characters? Which, if you support us at the highest tier on Patreon, you can ask some of these. And so this one is from our Herald John Carlfelt, and this one is a where's that Cosmere location? Whoa, ooh, switching it up. It's a twist.
I love a twist.
Yeah.
Hit
Do
me.
you like the character twist? The slug? It's a slug.
You could
name.
you could tell me anything is a slug name, and I'd go, oh, I guess, sure.
Hoid. All right.
No, except for that.
Okay.
Twist.
Okay.
Fine.
Okay. Clue 1. This location was the site of an important confrontation.
Storm Seat.
It's not
/
Storm
Narok.
Seat. Or Narok.
Same place.
Yeah, it's acceptable.
Would you consider this guess and the Shattered Plains to be the same guess?
No.
Oh.
The Shattered Plains.
Uh-oh.
No,
Well,
I'm
we
gonna say
definitely
no.
just narrowed it down.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
say no. I'm gonna say no. I don't.
yeah.
No, it is not the Shattered Plains.
I was gonna say, I was gonna guess Elantris, but now that we're potentially narrowed, I'm gonna say the tower.
It is the tower! Yay! I'm not.
That's hard about places because they're nested. You can go.
Yeah,
you can
right,
pick
exactly.
your level.
Like,
Roshar,
like you say,
the
where's
Cosmere.
that Cosmere location? And it's like Roshar. It's like, okay, I mean, yes.
Are
yes.
specific. Yeah.
Yeah.
Although it's interesting, you could have that issue eventually with the Sleepless if we start meeting individual.
No.
Nope. Okay, well, we did it. I'm so sorry, John. I sort of gave it away, but I blame Argent for everything. So I had to decide whether Shattered Plains was an acceptable answer. That was non-trivial for me to think about, okay?
We can at least give the rest of the clues.
Yes. Clue 2 was this location is easily recognized from a distance. Clue 3, this location is in the Rosharan system. Clue 4, this location is popular with the locals. Yeah. Sure. And clue 5, this
Arby's.
Yeah. This location may in some sense be plain, yet it is perceived as towering.
Oh my god.
Yes.
Send in more. Where's that Cosmere location so Eric can practice and get better at not giving things away?
Well, I think we just need to decide how nested things go. I just should have said no and just called it.
Yeah, but that's okay. Like it happens.
But like it was close enough that I was like, oh, I have to think about it. Oh, he says as an extra, Clue 4 is a reference to how chasm fiends seem to like pupating there. Okay.
Oh, I do.
It was like,
that's true. That's a good one.
That's true. That does work. That does work.
The locals, yeah.
Yeah.
That's
I like
not what I would have thought, but okay.
Yeah.
Poor chasm fiends.
Rip.
Do they
all right.
they prefer pupating on the tower specifically,
Yeah,
or
they
is
did.
it?
Yep.
Yeah. That's why they kept fighting over it.
Okay.
They've lost 1,000,000 times there. It's too far, but they like the pupate there.
All right.
Yeah.
Great. Well, on that note, I hope you enjoyed this episode, I guess. You can find all discussion of things like this on 17char.com and our Discord server, where you can find all the news, theories, and so much fun like this. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, SoundCloud. You can subscribe on YouTube. Put your comments below what you find, what you like or don't like about the Atium WoB. There you go.
No. This is too complicated for YouTube. No, we got to go simple.
No, you can just make it yes, no. You can just say yes or no. Like, do you like the Atium WoB?
Yeah. Do you like it? Do you not like it? Like, not what you like about it and what you don't.
Yeah. So you can just say yes or no.
Do both.
Yeah, you can do both. You can do both.
Or say in the comments below if I was more annoying on this episode.
Go back and look at the Half Shard episode. It's so much fun. It's before there were videos. It's so much fun. You can also leave us a review.
Fine this time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was fine.
Yeah, I thought it was good. I liked it. And by the way, the entire Half Shard episode, no conclusion on. We still don't know whether the Half Shards are radiant spread. By the way,
just like this one.
Yeah. So maybe we'll get it in Stormlight 5. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe we'll have to wait to Stormlight 8 for how important half shards have been.
I don't think they're going to be important ever again.
I don't think they are either with how many radiants we have. Great. So you can also leave us a review on iTunes and support us on Patreon. See you next time. We're going to talk about even more Words of Brandon, but clearly it was a good choice to separate this Word of Brandon into its own episode.
You didn't want to do a 6-hour episode? What?
No, I didn't. I didn't want to do that. No. Anyway, bye.
Peace.
Cheers.
Ka.